Hi, my name is Chris Brennan, and you're listening to the Astrology Podcast. This episode is recorded on Sunday, July 29th, 2018, starting just after 4 p.m., actually at 4:12 p.m. in Denver, Colorado, and this is the 166th episode of the show. For more information about how to subscribe to the podcast and help support the production of future episodes by becoming a patron, please visit theastrologypodcast.com/subscribe. In this episode, I'm going to be talking with Kelly Surtees and Austin Coppock about the astrological forecast for August of 2018. Hey guys, how's it going?
Oh, it's going all right, Chris. Good to be here.
Hey guys, good to be back.
Hey Kelly. Austin, you have some fire and brimstone going on in your neck of the woods, I heard earlier.
Yeah, for about the last 2 weeks straight, the forest fires just south of here have been so intense that you can see the smoke hanging in the air during the daytime. And you can, it smells like a meatless barbecue outside, and it's giving my poor cat coughing fits. It's probably not very good for me either, but I worry about the cat.
It's sweet that you worry about the cat.
Well, he makes a big show of it.
Wow, that is pretty serious. But otherwise, you've been taking some time off or relaxing a little bit, or at least not doing things full blast.
I dropped my schedule down a little bit. I stopped doing, I put my Deccan column on pause. I'm still teaching a class. I'm still doing readings, and I'm still writing dailies. But it's, I lowered the demands on my time and energy, which is great because I got really behind on a lot of things, including taking care of myself. And so I'm really glad I made the decision to retrograde with Mars.
I like that. It's like dancing with Mars, but not quite as fun, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. Or it's more, yes, the dance of the sweet science boxing. It's more rolling with the punches rather than leaning into them and getting them right in the face.
Smart move, I think. Very smart move.
Thanks.
Brilliant. And what have you been up to, Kelly?
I've been teaching, actually. My online class on predicting with progressions has been running through July. So I wanted to schedule that in June, but I wasn't with someone that I'm doing a little bit of work with. We couldn't quite make it happen. So we've been running it through July, and it's been going really well because I've been using some new technology with it. That's been going really fun, but I haven't quite got to the retrograding with Mars part yet, but I had that scheduled for parts of August. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Brilliant. All right. Well, I can't believe we're already in August at this point. 2018 is flying by. Let's see. We've got to get some news and announcements out of the way. We have a giveaway that we're doing this month, and then a few discussion topics, and then we'll get into the forecast for August here later, probably in like 45 minutes or something like that, if people want to jump ahead in the recording to that part of the episode. So first, news and announcements. One of the things I wanted to mention is that the Astrology Podcast now has an Instagram account. So you can find it on Instagram at the Astrology Podcast, all one word. Thanks to Kelsey Rose Tortisi for snagging the username at the United Astrology Conference and then giving it to me. I've been meaning to start an Instagram account for a while, and I'm glad I did because there's already a ton of people following us there. So yeah, you can follow that if you're interested. Are either of you into Instagram? Austin, are you a big Instagram guy?
My hatred, my ever-increasing hatred for Facebook is making me consider doing Instagram. I realized recently that Twitter is slightly less awful than Facebook.
Way less.
Yeah, I don't know. Right. Less. And then if Instagram seems to be pictures and less words, and I like pictures, but I don't know. I don't have an Instagram account, so I don't really know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter on astrology, Astro Twitter, as they call it, has really exploded over the past few years. It used to be not very active, but now suddenly tons of people are using it. And I didn't realize until recently, but the same thing is also happening on Instagram. I remember when it first came out years ago, in 2012, and I was using it for a little bit, but then I my account was hacked and I sort of forgot about that account and never went back to it, but it's become a whole sort of ecosystem unto itself.
Yeah, and Facebook does own Instagram. I don't know whether they bought it recently or something, but there is definitely like a lot of cross-pollination between Facebook and Instagram. A few people are making some notes in the comments about this. And Instagram has exploded lately, and there's a lot of growth there, I guess. It's not as hectic or crazy as Facebook is. But yeah, Astro Twitter, it used to kind of be Sam Reynolds who would have some really good discussions on Astro Twitter. And now there's more than a dozen people that are having these, and they're high quality conversations. They're not just like, oh, you're a Leo, you'll meet someone sexy this week. It's like debates about house systems or specific technique, or there was a lot about the eclipse, but from a more substantial perspective rather than a superficial perspective. So
right,
I think
people are using it to actually generate content. It's not just like promoting something that's somewhere else, but this is like the platform that people are using to like write a blog post basically, but doing it in a much shorter format. I guess that's what shifted over the past few years that I didn't realize, is that people started using that as the actual platform.
Yeah, and like Twitter's got these threads that you can have, and now they have these things called moments where you can kind of get a direct link to a thread conversation. So it's easier to go back and find, a series of tweets on a particular topic. So yeah, if you guys decide to spend more time there, we'll look forward to chit-chatting with you.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because there's little things that have probably developed out of there that have been unique in terms of astrology terminology and stuff. Like I've noticed over the past few months, or maybe longer than that, that everybody has started using the phrase like Leo season has begun or Cancer season has begun. And I thought this was a relatively recent phenomenon. As soon as I posted that on Twitter, everybody pointed out it's been going on for a lot longer than I thought, like most of the past decade, but it's something that's certainly got more popular so that it's entered like the common sort of public discourse where like a lot of people are actually using that terminology, which like a decade ago, I don't remember sort of being as common. Do you guys?
No, that makes sense. I think it's a piece of, because when you say that, I think like, oh, I can't remember ever not saying that. And I don't think, especially with other astrologers, I think it's like a piece of like astrology slang that's making it into, a wider population.
Yeah, like Mercury retrograde or Saturn return, it's sort of gone mainstream as something that you might have heard some astrologers use or people using it in columns, but I feel like I see it everywhere now. And somebody on Twitter actually pointed a screenshot of a Google Trends search for Leo season and Cancer season. I think it was it was Alan Laguda, who showed on Twitter how it was actually increasing over the past 8 years or so in frequency in terms of the number of people searching for that. So it's something that has been building or developing or getting more popular, but that in and of itself might be a sort of side effect of astrology becoming more popular with millennials, or astrology becoming more popular on social networking sites like Twitter or Instagram or what have you.
Yeah, definitely.
Agreed.
That's kind of exciting to hear, because if I ever go back to writing monthlies, which I probably will at some point, I've always wanted to write them based on solar months, right? Based on Cancer season, Leo season.
Yes.
But it's, and I think every astrologer does, but you're like, oh, it's going to confuse people.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not going to get any search traffic. I'll just write July. But like, the sun's movement through a sign is a much more real measure of time than the vulgar calendar months.
Did you call them vulgar?
Yeah, that's the appropriate term. Vulgar happens to sound insulting, which is great, but it is technically the right term.
Okay.
Right. So that's always the tension, though, that astrologers sometimes have when writing and creating content and marketing themselves, of that tension between, saying something that's genuine to, or fully genuine to the astrology, versus trying to translate that into language that the public already understands and knows and relates to.
And you've put yourself in the position to feel those tugs recently.
Yeah, so I guess it's been a month, and the last time we did an episode together, I was thinking about and had decided I was going to do some horoscopes, and then immediately after that, I actually went ahead. I stayed up all night and recorded a series of 12 video horoscopes for each zodiacal sign or each rising sign, and that was like a huge undertaking that took me all night to do, but I eventually actually got it out for July, and it was a huge success. But it was interesting some of the tensions that I ran into in terms of terminology, in terms of interpretation. I talked about that some of that already in the episode on why horoscopes are still important with Adam Ellenboss and Joe Gleason a few weeks ago. But yeah, I should check in and talk to you guys a little bit about that because there's some things I meant to get your opinion and advice on. So, I actually did my second. It was such a success that I did my second set of horoscope videos yesterday. So I'm a little bit out of it today because doing 12, 15-minute-ish videos is actually quite a kind
It's a
of
massive undertaking.
Yeah. So I think that's the one downside of how I'm approaching it is doing it with the video adds a lot of additional complications and sort of things that you guys might not have had to deal with, and where I would almost wish I was just doing a written version first, because there's some things that I could kind of like copy and paste or sort of do at my own pace. Whereas with a video, you just have to go and you just have to talk for 15 minutes. I mean, have you guys done anything like that video wise in the past?
I'm actually
No.
doing something, it's not horoscope videos, but in my Stellar Insight subscription offering, I do like a week ahead video for every week of the month. So
Okay.
I have to record 6 or 7 videos per month. You know, one's a month ahead overview, one for each of the 4 weeks of the month. And then there's like a check your chart video, which is more of an application thing. So I do know I can't record all 6 on one day. So the fact that you did all 12 on one day, I totally take my hat off to you. Because 15 minutes, a 15-minute video can be an hour or an hour and a half by the time you prep what you're going to say, prep the tech, get yourself organized. I don't know. I always faff and waste a lot of time getting drinks and cups of tea and making sure my hair isn't too frizzy. But obviously you don't have to worry about that part, Chris. But it's a lot to do the videos. Although the flip side is writing things out is equally time consuming, but for different reasons.
Right. Yeah, like I thought about one of the issues is preparing and to what extent I would prepare versus just doing it on the fly and looking at the charts. And I almost wished I was doing a video version because then I would be more readily prepared in terms of recording each video and looking at the specific transits to each rising sign. But then I would sort of be doubling my work. But I have a much better appreciation for how prepped you guys are going into these forecast episodes now, because if each of you have done sort of forecasts or horoscope column before we actually record these, you guys are much more familiar with the transits than anybody is. I mean, you're as familiar as you possibly can be each month before we record one of these episodes. One of the issues that I ran into, and I don't know if you guys get this, is this tension between being overly specific versus overly vague as one of the biggest issues that I ran into doing a horoscope column.
Yeah, definitely. Because, vague isn't good, but you can't be more specific than you can, given the information you have. You're like, okay, so this person is a Leo rising, and I'm delineating a Jupiter thing. Jupiter's in Scorpio, so Jupiter's in the 4th from Leo, and Jupiter's going to be ruling the 5th from Leo as well as the 8th, and I know what aspects it is, but like, you don't have their chart, right? You're just delineating from the perspective of one sign, which is great practice. And so there's stuff you can do with that where you're like, oh, okay, so if that Jupiter gets activated, not only is there going to be 4th house stuff, but because Jupiter has a trine, it can see the 8th, which it rules in that chart. There'll be some 8th house stuff there too, blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, exactly. It's like, what can I say given the information, and what is like only going to be true for like, 20% of them. And then sometimes, I don't know, Kelly, you probably experienced this, where you're like, ooh, like for that 30% or whatever who have this other setup in addition, I know it's going to look exactly like this. And so
Yeah.
sometimes I'll try to include like, and if, if you've got this going on, or if, blah, 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 then it's going to look more specifically like this. But you have to kind of do an if, then.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in my early 20s when I first started my horoscope column writing career, if you want to call it that, editors would sometimes come back and say, okay, that's great, but what if this person, like if you're writing about a seventh house thing and you're like, this is a really good thing for commitment, but then the editor's like, but what if they're single? Or what if they're, what if that's just not where they're at? So you kind of have to then think, okay, this is the theme, but how could it apply in 5 different circumstances, given that not everyone is in the same position at the same time?
Right.
Right. Or if it's like a fifth house transit and you relate that to like children or your children, or third house and like siblings. Because one of the issues I ran into is like sometimes that is going to be very relevant and I almost still want to mention it, but obviously that's not going to be relevant for everybody. So that's the general issue you run into when you're doing a horoscope column, is that it is something that's very general, and sometimes you can make specific statements, but obviously it's not going to be applicable to everybody. But when should you allow that to stop you from going out and making the more specific statement occasionally?
Yeah, well, and again, it's sort of a, if this is your situation, it's probably going to look like this. So if you have kids, look for this here.
Yes.
Or with the third, I always see people who are like siblings to a person. Those relationships get activated by third house transits, even if the person is an only child. I remember when I went into my third house perfection, I literally had 2 friends show up within the week of going into that perfection, who were both guys that I'd known for 20 years and had always done right by me, who were like brothers to me. They like both showed up, and I hadn't seen them for a long time. They both showed up like immediately within the week. And I was like, oh yeah, third house. And I saw my brother for the first time in a while that same week, or actually within the month. But it's, it's both siblings and sibling like. You just got to understand what sibling like means to the third house, right? That makes sense.
I mean, I had read somewhere, it might even be in Deb Holdings' book on the houses, that she had found maybe an obscure reference to friendship also being a little bit connected to the third, because the third house also sextiles the ascendant like the 11th does. And I thought which fits sort of what you're saying, Austin, like sibling like people can be friends, I guess.
I feel like it's third house includes like homies.
Yeah, like brothers in arms kind of thing.
Yeah, or just like your gang.
Yeah.
Whoever you
crew.
Yeah, exactly. Squad, I believe the kids are saying now.
That's actually one of the issues in ancient astrology, like in the Hellenistic tradition. In modern time, we've tended, as the tradition went forward, to like narrow down the houses so that there's like one house that relates to each thing or each person. But in a lot of the Hellenistic texts, they have like multiple houses that relate to different things, like multiple houses for friends, or multiple houses that relate to children. Like the 10th house is one of the houses that relates to children in addition to the 5th, and things like that. So that's something I think about sometimes when issues like this come up.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, derived or secondary houses, right? Like right. So for example, the, like the siblings of your siblings, the third from the third, or, the siblings of your mom, the third from the fourth, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Oh, you can have a lot of fun with that. Your children's children, your grandkids, and.
So what's funny is like, sure, right? Yeah. That's. Sorry, go on. I don't want to get. I don't want to get too. I'll get lost in this.
We could go on about this for hours, couldn't we? Did you want to say more, Chris, about your video horoscope?
The other thing I wanted to say, I'm about to put up my next set, which I just recorded yesterday on my YouTube channel, probably today or tomorrow. The only other thing I wanted to say is we did a whole episode sort of defending, the writing of horoscopes and why it's valid and why it's still important. And I almost wanted to see if you guys wanted to like play devil's advocate for what is the other side of the argument of where do horoscopes come up short, or where is it that the more advanced forms of astrology are still I don't know, important, not important, because it's almost like an obvious answer, but what's the other side of the argument if we were going to argue against
Again.
horoscopes? Because I almost felt like I didn't present that side of the argument enough in that episode. And so I was curious what the arguments would be if we wanted to try to generate some genuine ones for, I don't know, against horoscopes.
Well, I would say that if horoscopes are not contextualized as being a simplification, and a fun and sometimes sometimes fun, sometimes useful simplification, then then they can give people the impression that that is astrology. That is the extent of astrology. But I think as long as they're properly contextualized, there's no like deep moral argument against it.
I mean, is it always possible to contextualize it? Because like I don't, it's like I don't think I've said anything necessarily. Or there's sort of an implication there that there's more to this, or
Well,
sometimes there's like a comment in passing. But how do you contextualize it?
I don't know. I've had a disclaimer on my website above every horoscope section for as long as I can remember. That's like, hey, guess what? This is not the full extent of astrology. This is not, you should look at your chart, et cetera, et cetera. This is fun and useful. It's not astrology, but this is not the thing. Like, this is not the entirety of the thing. This is not it in even remotely its full glory. That said, let's do some scopes. And I've like gone back and forth about doing horoscopes a lot, because half of me be like, oh, this is stupid, I hate this, and then I'll be like, oh no, this is really like a good way to extend beyond the inherently esoteric nature of like full astrology. But yeah, I don't know, it's there's definitely, like you said, I'm really glad that you are feeling the tension, Chris, because Kelly and I have like been, how should we say, cooked like soup in this tension for like a decade plus.
Right.
And so it's nice because I can see you're really feeling it. And these are, I don't know, it's good.
I mean, the arguments against it are the simplification. How can one horoscope apply to everyone born under Aries? And some of those arguments actually say more about the other person and their lack of understanding about the depth of astrology. So I think that part of the contextualization is for us on the inside of astrology, knowing that horoscopes have a place, but they're just an entry point. I mean, you couldn't even call them an appetizer. Like, they're not even that, but that they are pointing you to where, this can go. And I think they can be a really good tool for education. So informing people that, they might be this sign, but this planet might affect this topic or whatever, or that, there is a Jupiter and it's going to do something to them, and that, or not do something to them, but, stir something in their chart and get some sort of resonance in their life. There's a lot of arguments against them, but a lot of the time they do seem to just be, it's like they're missing the point, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I just like having that discussion in order to like further articulate that, because it may be something a lot of astrologers are almost taking for granted, or it's sort of a good disclaimer to have on some of these that most people may not realize. So it's nice to see astrologers that have been doing this professionally for a long time actually talking about it and exploring some of those issues.
Yeah, I guess one danger, which is not, how should we say, it doesn't contradict the practice as a whole, but can certainly create negative results, is when the astrologer who's writing the horoscopes doesn't give context and does things like, hey, Aries, you're an Aries, how's it being an Aries? And they encourage an over-identification with the qualities of a single sign.
Right. So when the horoscope is focused on personality description, like you're an Aries and therefore you have these traits, that can be, I mean, women's magazines love this kind of stuff, but it is getting more into, well, it's less aligned to the actual solar chart, for instance, rather than saying this topic is highlighted this month. So there's a difference, because horoscopes can be, this is your personality according to your sign, or they can be, this is what to expect in the month ahead according to your rising sign, but not everybody understands the difference.
Well, and it's tough because there's going to be some people that have like a stellium of planets or have like their sun and moon and rising sign in the same sign. and they really do like identify with that zodiacal sign very closely, and those are the people perhaps that might respond to their horoscope the most strongly, whereas there's other people where, you know, if they're reading it for their sun sign and that's like not a major placement in their chart, you know, their ascendant is something different and they were born with a night chart or something like that, where they may not identify with it at all. And I wonder if there's almost a filtering mechanism that's built into horoscopes as a result of that, in terms of who gets really into it versus how those who it never really resonates for them until they find the more advanced forms of astrology.
It's 100% a solar filter.
It is. Yeah. So day chart people are generally going to resonate perhaps more, or people who know their rising sign. I mean, one thing I say about horoscopes that I'm saying to clients and students, you know, newer clients or newer students, if you read horoscopes, that's totally cool, but can you please read for your rising sign rather than your sun sign, because the way they're written, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Well, you know, when I write horoscopes, I always end up Cancer, which is my rising, almost always ends up being more on point than Pisces, which is my sun. With Pisces, I'm always like, yeah, I can see how that applies. That's not wrong. But with Cancer, I'm like, yeah, that's what's going on.
Well, they're so houses based when you write horoscopes, because the starting assumption for anyone writing horoscopes is we assume the sun sign and the rising sign are the same, because we can only write 12. We can't write 144. I mean, imagine if you had to record 144 videos, Chris.
Every week.
It's insane. I mean, there isn't enough, like from a print media perspective, there's no way they'd give you that much space. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, I had a client recently who was a Libran, but she was the sun Uranus in Libra, and just getting the personal chart interpretation of why you're not like other Librans. She was like, oh, now I understand, because my colleague was trying to tell me about Libra, but I didn't relate to it at all. And I was like, well, for these various reasons, you're not like other Libras. And I mean, it's understanding, I guess, that horoscopes are the gateway drug. They're not the main thing.
Yeah, well, one of the positive things, at least, is I've noticed that with the popularization of astrology lately, that more people know what their ascendant or rising sign is than 10 years ago. And that's becoming much more common knowledge, because it's so much easier now that's one of the side effects of the rise of the internet and websites like Astro.com and Cafe Astrology, is that it's so easy now to calculate your ascendant or your rising sign as long as you know your birth time, that I feel like so many more people know it and know their big three of like their sun, moon, and rising sign than I've ever seen before. And that has sort of interesting implications then as well, in terms of the ability of people to read horoscopes from their rising sign rather than only knowing their sun sign. Yeah,
it's good stuff. You know, it would be fun if people knew more. I think it would be really interesting to do horoscopes from the perspective from the house position of the planet that ruled the ascendant. Right, like write horoscopes from the Lord of the Ascendant, but that requires a lot on the behalf of the audience.
Sure. Yeah. One other drawback I've noticed is that sometimes when I'm delineating house placements, like that Uranus ingressing into Taurus and how that shifted into a new whole sign house for everybody over the past few months. And that one's actually very important this month, because Uranus is making its very first station within that sign that it's made since it ingressed for the first time in May. You know, there's some people that are going to react very strongly to that transit early on, and there's some people that are going to react very strongly like much later on, depending on where their personal placements are. And that's the only area where I felt like there's been some issues in terms of generalness versus specificity, because you can't say who's going to, you know, feel it earlier versus later, like somebody that has their ascendant at 2 degrees of Taurus versus somebody that has it at like 20 degrees of Taurus.
Well, so one horoscope trick that you'll see is you're like, okay, so, you know, Uranus enters Taurus, it means it's for Taurus. For those of you, you know, for the Tauruses out there who were born, you know, like in April, right, just specifying that, like the April Tauruses, you're going to feel this a lot more.
Okay.
Right.
Versus
because people know their birthday, right? And so you don't even have to say early or late sign. You can be like, you know, for those, you know, mid-November Scorpios, you know, this is going to hit you double, or, you know, or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. That's a good trick. It's an indirect way of getting and knowing the degrees, or at least 1 degree of the sun.
Kelly, you've probably done that 100 times, right?
Yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, Austin, we've got all the same tricks. I love it.
Yeah, I need to mine you guys for like additional shortcuts and like little horoscope writer tricks. You guys are like battle hardened horoscope writers at this point.
Indeed, grizzled.
Right.
Yeah, I'm on a break. I've benched myself. I'm actually, other than my annuals for well-being, I'm not doing weeklies or monthlies at the moment in any capacity, which is, I haven't been doing them for about 12 months and I'm almost recovered from however long I did them before to start something again. So I don't think I want to go back into weeklies, but I'm contemplating monthlies.
I'm taking a break from it, but I like doing the Decanlays, which I did over the last year.
That's really cool.
I did one round of 36, and I like that. I didn't put that on pause because I disliked it. It was just taking a ton of energy and time.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that's what I remember about weeklies is it's just, there's no let up. You've just got to churn them out. Dailies is next level. But.
Yeah. Well, the furthest extent that where angels fear to tread and I will not go is horoscopes for dailies. I do write-ups of the days.
Oh, that's right. You don't do daily horoscopes. Oh.
No, I delineate the quality of the day. Just so it's almost more of a like casual electional thing. It's just sort of like, this, evening's really nice. We get like a nice moon Jupiter during the evening, morning's rough, moon aspects Mars and Saturn before departing it's more of like a scheduling convenience than it is. So like,
where I read yours, Austin? I read these on Twitter and I love them.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. We have them scheduled.
No, they're not real dailies from a horoscope perspective.
No, they're not horoscopes.
No.
Their description of the conditions with some suggestions about, strike while the iron is hot. Like this is a good time to do some shit. Or like, this is not a good Friday night for partying. Don't do. Right. I advise not to. I also give people advice on when to have fruitless arguments on social media. When there's a really good Mars configuration, I'm like, if you really want to waste some time becoming furious with strangers, this is really the prime election.
Jump on Twitter now.
I love that.
Right.
It's truly astrology for the 21st century.
Yeah, right. But I can't bring, one, I don't want to do daily horoscopes. And two, I like taking a more electional descriptive angle. And what I really like about doing the more electional descriptive is, so I do a month ahead of time, and then we pre-program them so that they release. And then my Patreons all get the whole month as a PDF. But it's good for micro-analyzing the days because you're looking at the moon applying, departing between everything all month. And so sometimes I see things from that point of view that that I see things in more detail from that point of view that I might have noticed from a monthly or decanly or weekly overview. But I'm like, but when it actually happens, the moon's over here. And then there's this, it's a little bit different.
This is why I actually have encouraged students and practitioners over the years to do a period of time where you actually write daily horoscopes. Like just set yourself like some sort of challenge for maybe a week. I would say a month, but I appreciate like 12 a day for a month is a lot, but it brings you into this really nuanced understanding of some of those personal planet cycles and things that you wouldn't have given a lot of thought to that you realize are actually much more rare than you might have realized. Like it gave me, I did dailies. Okay, Austin, here's one for you. I don't know if I've shared this on the show. The first daily column I had was years ago. I was in Australia. I was writing for a mobile or a cell phone company back in the early days of mobile phones and horoscopes going out on them. And they wanted love-themed daily horoscopes. So every day for Aries, what is their love, horoscope? And I did that for 3 or 4 years, which was really intense, but it did teach me a lot. But the idea of where angels fear to tread, daily horoscopes will bring you into a whole other place.
Oh, and daily love horoscopes
Like
too.
I knew when you were like, I don't even want to do dailies. I'm like, imagine doing dailies on a specific theme. Um,
Right, because it's even more restricted in terms of what you can talk about or how you can contextualize things.
exactly.
Yeah,
But
that
it's a
sounds
good
rough.
teaching tool.
I would love
And
to do that sarcastically,
I
or
think
just
Austin, we would love to read about your sarcasm.
or not sarcastically, just brutally, honestly. You know, it's
Oh, like
like,
if you were to give everyone their love horoscope each day.
yeah, like, you know, it's like, oh, well, the moon is conjunct Saturn and square Mars in your seventh. Like, you know, this stirs up deeply felt feelings of hatred. Like, you
Try not
know,
to
I mean,
project too much.
yeah, I mean, that's how it would actually be. Or it's like, well, nothing's happening in your seventh house for a couple years. If you're single now, get used to it. Um, I mean, because that's reality, right?
Well, honest, it is reality. It is, yes. It's not maybe a horoscope writing land reality in terms of what people want necessarily, but it would be very honest. And sometimes, it's like, okay, don't worry about this part of your life too much for a couple of years. Focus
Yeah,
on other things.
And
Yeah.
that's
yeah,
actually a genuine
absolutely.
issue I ran into is when to be more optimistic versus when to be more realistic or when to talk about like difficult or negative things. That was a real issue I ran into talking about like the difficult houses, like the eighth house or the 12th house, which are often delineated as more problematic in traditional astrology. And I found myself wanting to fall back on more modern delineations that are a little bit more like humanistic or growth oriented or encouraging versus, talking about some of the more difficult stuff that might arise with some of the other houses.
Yeah, I try to do problem solving because if there's a configuration that suggests that there are problems in that area of life and those problems will be intensified, I try to give people, if I can, some insight into that area of life, what kinds of problems tend to arise. Look, you know, like with the eighth house, one of the things I see a lot, because it's other people's resources, is like, you know, when Saturn's in the eighth or something, people will get tangled up in who deserves what and how much is mine and how much is yours, and that person owes me, or this person feels like I owe them. And, you know, I'll just point them at that and be like, this is a tangly area of life. That is why it is a dark house, right? I won't say the dark house part, but this is a tangly area of life. You want to be, you know, some stuff might come up here. You want to be prepared to deal with that. Like, you know, just leaning into it's a problem, so do problem solving rather than like, oh, it might be totally awesome.
I
Sure.
do think people appreciate the honesty, and it's if something difficult, because there are configurations astrologically that create stress or tension or discord, if you like. So at least being able to say, this, tense aspect is going to show up in your career. So don't overreact if your boss, I don't know, does something, yells at you or something.
Yeah.
It at least gives people a little bit of preparation and like, oh, just cue in about these things there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's really important and relevant because that actually came up this month. I think for like Aries rising, where Mars is going retrograde and stationing direct towards the end of August in their 10th house. And one of my delineations was like strife or conflict with at work, within the context of your career or with superiors. And that seems like a pretty straightforward delineation to me. But at the same time, I wonder if somebody might read that doesn't have any background in astrology and if it will unnecessarily freak somebody out. Sometimes that's some of the things that have come up that I've started to think about in doing this.
Yeah, yeah. But one way to do that is, so for example, you know, Mars regressing back into the 10th from Aries while ruling Aries, right? It's like, yeah, it's coming back. So, you know, it'll bring up stuff that happened or was brewing during the time Mars was in Capricorn before, but it's like, you know, it's on its way to direct. And if you think about the Lord, so with Aries, right? So the Lord, ruler of Aries, being exalted and in the 10th, that's actually like some powerful, you know, that's actually a positive configuration, right? Like if you saw somebody with a chart like that, you'd expect them to be a serious ass kicker. And so, you know, it's moving from that, you know, it's moving from strife into what is probably a very positive moment of like, I know exactly what I'm doing with both myself and my career, and it's a bloody road, but I'm totally ready to walk it, you know? Anyway, that's the way I think about things.
Well, yeah, because Austin, what you've done is something that I would do similarly, which is the Mars station in Capricorn this month. It reflects back to events from May, and in some ways, it's that idea when Mars was last in late Cap. It's sort of that idea of resolution or culmination from that time for the Aries rising people at work, potentially.
Yeah, and so I guess, you know, the what we're both talking about is context. Like, if you just say, you know, this week there will be strife at work, and your body will feel like shit too. Sorry. Well, if your body will feel terrible as well, that can be totally true and accurate. But if you sandwich it between the week after that, which is different, then like you're not fudging, right? You're not like blurring the lines, but you're just giving context. So people aren't hyper focusing on like the one bad day. You know, we all have bad days, bad weeks, bad months, but it's not like, you know, astrology tells you that nothing is forever.
Yes. That this is the weather, and the weather passes and changes.
Yeah, thank God. I'm about ready to be done with the season.
Yeah. Let's have Mars in the South Node to have a bit of distance. Each of them back to different corners, please.
Yeah.
We will get into that in a second. So,
all right.
why don't we wrap up this intro section? We've got some not news and announcements. We've got some other news and announcements we need to get out of the way, and then we can move on to the forecast for this month. So one of the news and announcements is that we're actually, for this month's giveaway, we have a special giveaway from Austin's wife's company, Sphere and Sundry, which I mentioned during the episode that we did earlier this month that she recently started. So Sphere and Sundry produces materials for self-care and magic on rare and potent astrological elections, which are chosen in consultation with Austin. So you actually help her do some of these magical elections each month for the production of some of these different things, right?
Yeah. You know, I'm not picking all of the elections. She picks different projects and gets inspired. And then we work together to fine tune the elections and, you know, get the planetary hours and all of that as, you know, as clean and perfect as possible.
Brilliant. All right. So the items are created by Austin's wife, Caitlin, following strict ritual protocols on sympathetic herbs, metals, gems, and oils. So today we're going to give away 3 full sets from the Asclepius series that she recently came out with, which Austin and I talked about a little bit, I think, during episode 164 when we were talking about your book. We actually that was the one that we actually discussed, right?
Yeah, we were talking about Demetra's essay, which is the Thessalos translation, which is a translation of a book of Hellenistic era astrological herb magic, which claims transmission from Asclepius as part of its formula. And that was, I think, part of the inspiration for Kate to do an Asclepius series, working with. So Asclepius is obviously not a planet, but the you know, for the Greeks, our constellation of Ophiuchus was Asclepius. He's Asclepius is the god of medicine. And so that the guy handling the snake, that's the single snake that you see wound around the staff for the medical symbol. And so we've been reading some Bernadette Brady on the chief star, one of the chief stars in Asclepius or Ophiuchus, which is Russell Hogg, and she'd found it to be strongly related to healing talent and interest in natal charts. And even though it's not one of the fixed stars, which is in the short list for magic, like the Behenian stars, it was an experiment Kate wanted to do. And so it was the moon on Russell Hogg, et cetera, and it ended up being really good. The stuff is so, for lack of a better term, healy, and it's it came into. I'm really glad she did that experiment, because I've definitely needed some healy over the last month. and it's been really good. It was, I think it worked better. The material ended up being way more potent than either of us expected.
Brilliant. All right. Well, we're going to give away 3 full sets from that Asclepius series, and the set includes incense, anointing oil, bath salt, ritual salt, and a spray, in addition to instructions for the use and a ritual for healing and purification called the Triple Purification of Asclepius. And the value of the set is $260 per full set. So we're going to give that away to 3 lucky patrons on the $5 and $10 tier who support the Astrology Podcast each month as a sort of thank you as part of the giveaway that we do each month. For those looking to get their start with planetary magic or just magic in general, Sphere and Sundry is a great place to start because all of the items come with directions, prayers, and suggested timings for working. So the site also features a lot of useful information about remediation for natal placements and transits. So you should check out and learn more about it at sphereandsundry.com. Cool.
Yeah,
All right.
Kate's been on fire. She's put out so much well-written material in such a short period of time. It's kind of nice from a partnership perspective because I've like taken a step back and been less productive, and it just happens that she's been on fire for the entire time that I'm like sleepy and tired and sad.
Yeah, she's been killing it. I love some of the articles that she's been
really
putting up on the website, as well as some of the other social media stuff on Twitter and Instagram. So people should definitely check out the website, and you'll see a lot of the different offerings and other things available there. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I'll announce the winners for that through Patreon in the next day or two. So keep an eye out for that in the announcement for the release of this episode. All right, so other news and announcements before we move on. Kelly, do you have anything?
2 things quickly. I will be in Sydney at the end of August where I'm teaching a 1-day workshop on traditional health and medical astrology. So for intermediate students that are in Sydney and want to learn about health and wellness as well as self-care and things like illness, tendencies and trends in the birth chart, come along to that workshop at the end of August. And my next group mentoring starts early September. So for anyone who is either one of my students or wants to join the group mentoring program, we have a relatively small group. So we are capped at 20, and we meet once a month to chart chat, basically. You get the charts in advance, and then we go through how we would approach them. Our September focus is timing trends. So if you'd like to brush up or practice some of your timing techniques in a group mentoring context, you're welcome to join us in September.
Brilliant. Awesome. And Austin, what do you have going on?
I'm teaching one class in August. I'm teaching my class on fixed stars, which is an introduction to fixed stars and how to use them. And then I deal with not all of the stars in the sky, obviously, but I go through the.
You're not going to speak for a week just on the fixed stars.
Yeah, right. I do go through the entire Bohemian list as well as the 4 royal stars. I figured, I was like, what do I do for a set? And I was like, I can't ignore the royals and I can't ignore the Bohemian list. And so it's a discussion of how to use the fixed stars. And it is not an explicitly astromagical class, but the discussions of the stars includes a description of what Agrippa says they're good for example, for a talisman. And I use that to contribute to some of the delineation material, like different angles on that star, right? So if we're looking at Regulus, for example. So, Ptolemy says this about Regulus in a magical context, in a magical context. Agrippa says this. It's also worth noting that this star is what indicates this lunar mansion, and this lunar mansion is about this. Just, bringing in different material, getting different angles, trying to understand the star by looking at it in different contexts.
Awesome. That sounds great. A lot of people are always asking me about fixed stars. That is actually something I have not done an episode of the podcast on yet that I meant to at some point. So maybe
you should get Bernadette Brady on.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
She's the star lady.
She is phenomenal.
Yeah, we did an episode last month or last year, 1 year ago from I think this month on the eclipses, which is the other big thing that she's known on is her work on eclipses and
Yeah.
the Saros cycles. But fixed stars is like the other major things that she's known for.
Yes.
Yeah, I find her work on the fixed stars to be invaluable. There's a lot of I don't know, a lot of the other sources seem like a giant mess to me when I compare them with Brady's work.
Her book on fixed stars, the Brady's Book of Fixed Stars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a clarity. Yeah, exactly.
Got all of your books just in immediate reaching distance of the important ones.
Yeah, I
just
have a tiny
speak-
office. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just in terms of what I have within reach.
Yeah, I'll second you
Speaking
on that
of that, in terms of books that I've gotten,
one. Austin, your book is by my bedside. So that it's a book off. Yeah.
I like the idea that we all have like each other's books and other paraphernalia within reaching distance at any time.
Totally. I have
Where's
a tiny office and I have a bookshelf with maybe about 50 books on it, but they're the books that I use all the time.
Right.
Yeah, I have a milk crate with like what I'm working with right now, and so there are about 10 books in there.
So many
I've
good
got a whole-
ones.
I've got a whole shelf just behind the camera that has about 20 books. I think astrologers have always, that's one of the things that unites astrologers. Astrologers and their books, like Dimitra always talks about that because it's true even historically in the tradition as well, because that's how astrology is transmitted. So one of the ways that it's transmitted is through books and translations and writings. And so astrologers have always like had their books as like a major thing involved with their study. And it's something that all astrologers can kind of relate to in different traditions.
We're basically
definitely.
book nerds.
Right. Astrologers are basically book nerds.
Yeah. I don't even know where we're going for that.
Yeah,
Well, I know where I was going.
Oh, we were giving away Kate's wonderful
No,
product.
no. We were gonna. I was gonna. Oh, it's so hard not swearing. I was gonna give you some stuff
Some
about-
excellent stuff.
about not having a book that Chris and I can hold up. Where's the book, Kelly?
Oh, yeah. That's true. Why don't I have my own book? Well, I confess to you the reason why, Austin. But you will be happy to know, and maybe my clients are less happy to know, but I have started just trimming down my consultation hours for the second half of the year. Because as you guys both know, writing a book takes a huge amount of time. And I've been very fortunate to be able to do many other things with my time with astrology, but I have to make adjustments for book creation.
Is it going to be
Even
the
Dimitra
secondary
was-
progressions book?
Yeah, I'd like to start with that just to get that out. And then there'll probably be, as you guys probably have the idea of, there's 4 or 5, because I mean, when you teach astrology a lot, you get used to how you like to explain things or the kind of references you want to provide for students. So a lot of it would be that sort of accessible, practical space. Yeah, and with the blend of, we're talking to people in the 21st century, but how can we use some of the older techniques? So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's going to be great. Everybody
Stuff.
loved that. Still one of my most popular episodes was the secondary progressions episode we did earlier this year. So I know that's going to become a classic whenever you do come out with it.
Thank you. Yeah, and there isn't a lot of stuff on it. I mean, I was 18 when I read Stephen's book, The Changing Sky, and I haven't seen anything better come out since. Like, I'm still using that as a resource reading guide for students. Bernadette Brady's book, The Eagle and the Lark, they're the two books that I use as reference for that. But I would do things a little bit differently. Of course, we all put our own kind of angle on it. So
Yeah, it's weird with there's some techniques like that where even though everyone uses it, like there's not a lot of books on the topic. Like Synastry, that was the last episode I
Same
did, is
thing.
another one. But this book by John Green, this is his book, Do You Love Me? The Astrology of Relationships. Really good book on synastry. Interesting shortcut he took to doing it that I forgot, because he originally studied with and was a tutor at the Center for Psychological Astrology. A large part of the book is actually like transcripts from a workshop that he gave that he then edited and then basically published at that point. And I forgot that a lot of the Center for Psychological Astrology books are like that, where you can read the interaction between him and like sort of like dialoguing with the audience and taking their questions. And that's kind of a really smart way to like get out sort of a book relatively quickly on a topic, is to do an edited transcript of like a presentation.
That
Yeah, well,
is, yes, that is a great idea.
that's
Just
I've been working
the
on that for about 7 years.
it's like there's some precedent for that, you know, in terms of literary style, right? There's a lot of that in the Brihad Parashara Shastra. It's a dialogue between the teacher and a student. There's the Corpus Hermeticum is a dialogue that, like, you know, they're mythical dialogues, but I don't know if one would be comfortable assuming a mythical role. But yeah, dialogue, you know, dialogue as text has been a thing for a long time, and you can do things with it that you can't do with like straight prose or essay.
I would love that actually if you adopted that as a literary conceit, Kelly, of having like a revealed wisdom about secondary progressions, and it's like your dialogue with Hermes of how you learned this technique, and then
You should be
presenting it.
yeah, or you can have Hermes asking you questions.
Oh, right. I'm giving him
Right.
Okay, well, that's probably not the style that I'll go for. I could try it as a writing practice, but no, don't hold your breath waiting for that one. It'll
All
be
right.
a little more, less mythical, but hopefully really practical.
Good. Well, looking forward to it. All right, shall we? We're only like an hour into this episode, so shall we transition into talking about the forecast for August?
If you don't think it's premature.
I mean,
We
it
don't
is a
wanna
little
rush
early,
these
but
things.
right.
But I mean,
So-
there is a mild segue here on the fixed stars to the full moon at the end of August, but we would have missed a bit in between.
Maybe
Right.
we'll save it.
Yes.
And actually, one of the things that's funny is usually because I only create the artwork for the forecast episodes usually after we've recorded it, when I'm in the process of trying to like post the actual finished episode. But this month, because I did the horoscopes yesterday, I actually created the artwork first. So let me share the Planet Watcher calendar for August. Is this showing up on your screens?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so there it is. So this is the Planet Watcher sort of snippet from the Planet Watcher calendar for August. By the way, Planet Watcher
that.
calendar, you can find that on Amazon, and I've had to drop the prices radically because basically we're more than halfway through the end of the year. So if you want to get some cool astrology calendars still, do a search for Planet Watcher calendar 2018 or astrology calendar posters or whatever it's called, and you'll find like heavily discounted posters at this point. Anyway, this is the snapshot for August, and these are some of the major transits that we're going to be talking about today. I mean, this is pretty much all of them. Are there any that are not depicted here that you guys notice that are missing?
I mean, there are some details, but this is a good overview.
Yeah.
Sure. So just to maybe run through them really quickly, we've
Got the
got
highlights.
Venus ingressing into Libra on the 6th. The next day on the 7th, Uranus stations retrograde in early Taurus at 2 degrees of Taurus. Then a few days later, we have a solar eclipse in Leo on the 11th. The following day on the 12th, we have Mars, which retrogrades back into Capricorn from Aquarius. A week later, we have Mercury, which has been retrograde in Leo all month, stations direct in Leo around the 19th. The same day, we have transiting Jupiter exactly transiting Neptune from the water sign Scorpio and Pisces. Then a few days later, we have the Sun ingressing into Virgo on the 23rd, as it always does, roughly around the same time of the year. Then we have a Pisces full moon on the 26th, and finally Mars stations direct at 28 degrees of Capricorn on the 27th of August. And those are the major transits for the month.
Yep. So that's it, folks. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks for
We can all go
coming.
home.
That's a really good visual, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's helpful. And I incorporated that into most of my video horoscopes yesterday, which is why I have it. But I thought it would be a useful sort of foundation or starting point for us.
Totally.
So let me pull up, for those watching the video version of this episode, the actual chart for right now and for August. So here's the chart from SolarFire that I usually use using my Hellenistic page layout from SolarFire. this is, everyone always asks, for some reason people don't know, but this is using the astrology program called SolarFire, and you can get a 15% discount on the program if you use the promo code AP15 when you purchase it from the company that produces it, called Astrolabe. So here's the chart for right now, but let's go forward and start with the beginning of the month on August 1st.
Bam, fireworks.
What are the...
Mars square Uranus.
Oh, you're right. So the month opens like
Yep.
right from the start with an almost exact, it is exact, that very first day of August with the Mars-Uranus square, from Mars being at 2 degrees of Aquarius to Uranus at 2 degrees of Taurus.
Yeah, and this is the second square. The first one was back mid-May when Mars first ingressed into Aquarius and Uranus first ingressed into Taurus. So there is sort of an energetic resonance, if you will, but this is we talked earlier in the year about Mars making 3 squares to Uranus as part of this retrograde process. So we've got the second one coming up at the beginning of August. It's not the same energy as the eclipse at the end of July, but it's definitely a combustible, electric, destabilizing, if you like, kind of energy, because Mars and Uranus together are definitely shaking things up. Things are not, they don't have that permanent quality. It's like everything is in flux.
Right, definitely. You've got the sort of severing and separating energies of Mars, or sometimes strife and conflict types sort of energy of Mars that's coming into a hard aspect and creating tension with the sort of explosiveness or unexpected disruptions that are typically indicated by Uranus.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, Austin?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I was writing about this in a daily the other day, and I can actually remember what I wrote for once. So, Uranus catalyzes, right? And so Uranus is in a position to catalyze what Mars is doing. And so one of the, the ignition or an explosion when you light the firecracker that's catalyzing, right? And so this will definitely catalyze some explosions, both personal and probably literal in the world. But Uranus is also in a position here to catalyze some of the insights into whatever process this Mars retrograde has led people into, catalyzing insights about personal power, the use and misuse of personal power, what's worth fighting for, what's not worth fighting for. Uranus is big on, my pet phrase is breakdowns and breakthroughs. And with Mars, I would add blow ups. This is definitely not like a great configuration to have a sensitive conversation around difficult topics unless you absolutely have to. It's very, I think this might, I can definitely see it catalyzing separations, Chris, like you said. Both Uranus and Mars like separations. And so, and some of those withdrawals or severances may be temporary. Some of them, some of it might just be getting some space. Some of it might be more permanent. I would also add that, if you look at where the moon is, so the aspect is exact on the 1st, but 2 days later on the 3rd,
Yes.
the moon conjoins Uranus and squares Mars while it's still very tight. So it's, it's over those couple days that, that it'll be quite active.
It's a very Uranus start to the month, even though, I know there's been a lot of talk about the eclipse, but yeah, the moon activation in this square, I like that word, catalyzes, Austin. Yeah.
Thanks. That's one of my go-tos for Uranus.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, that's
You
good.
can
And
feel it.
it's not just that the square's happening, but it's like Uranus is already slowing down and is only a week away from stationing retrograde. So
Yeah.
so it's like Uranus is actually getting amped up just in and of itself at the same time, even if it wasn't squaring Mars, but it happens to be doing both.
Yeah. I like that term, amped up. When a planet approaches a station, it feels like it's gathering a charge. It's brewing something, and so when it gets pinged, when it's in that charge state, you usually get more out of it. It's sort of like one last thing to say before turning retrograde, this Mars Uranus configuration.
Right, definitely. And it seems like one of the things I was saying in the horoscopes is that Uranus or planetary stations, even though there is like technically a specific day in which the planet is officially moving backwards instead of forwards, or forwards instead of backwards, it's not always like that exact day that the result happens, but sometimes there's kind of like an orb of a few days or even like a week on stations, because they're really like slowing down and hovering around the same degree for quite a while. Would you guys agree, or is that too wide, like putting like a weak orb on something like a planetary station, especially for an outer planet?
I think that's 100% what I do, and I special attention to the day of that planet, which is previous to the station director retrograde. We don't. There's no Uranus day. We have a 7-day week, right? But for Mars, like the Tuesday right immediately before the station, you will feel it, and same with the planetary day following.
I wish there was a Uranus day. That would be great.
It
You
would
could
make timing more convenient.
It would. Um, yeah. I mean, I think I agree completely with the station. And I think, for something like Uranus, I might even use a little bit more than a week, or look at, what are the other planets that are going to trigger this outer
Mhm.
planet as it's in its station degree. Because they will be, as you said, your image, Austin, of like they're broadcasting and the other planets coming in that are aspecting them are picking up that message and carrying it forward.
Yeah, totally.
All right. So, yeah, so we open up the month with that Mars Uranus square. Uranus is also stationing retrograde, and it turns fully retrograde by the 7th of August. And this is the first time, as I said earlier, that Uranus has actually made any sort of station since it moved into Taurus back in May for the first time. And
Yeah,
this is going to be
it's station direct.
station direct. Say it again.
Yeah, it's stationing direct at 2.
Retrograde.
Retrograde.
I beg your pardon. Sorry, retrograde. Sorry,
Right. So
my brain is retrograde.
no problem. And so this is like a long-term transit in terms of Uranus going through Taurus over the course of the next 6 or 7 years. But I think this is actually really important in terms of people getting a sense what that Uranus transit is going to be about over the course of most of the next decade. Because even though the ingress of Uranus was important back in May, and that's when all the astrologers were talking about it, this being the first time it's stationed in that sign, I think a lot of people are going to start to get some sense for some of the themes that are going to sort of grow and develop and eventually start to snowball as Uranus moves further and further into that sign, as a result of this station, especially within a week before or a week after this station, just because yeah, those stations can be so important and so much of an intensification of the planet. I think it would be good for people to just pay attention to any themes, even if they're very subtle or very low key type themes that are occurring in their life at that time, because of the potential for that to snowball as Uranus moves further and further into the sign.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. This is the first time Uranus is stationed in Taurus in many decades.
Right. In something like, what is it, 84 years or
84
something like that?
years. Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. So that's happening already in the first week. And right around the same time, we have one of the first planetary ingresses that takes place this month, which is the ingress of Venus, which takes place on August 6th, where it moves from Virgo into Libra. And Venus is going to spend the rest of the month transiting through Libra for the next 3 weeks of August on into early September.
Yeah, and this is a really nice thing. It's a benefic in the sign that it rules. The only thing is that I don't know, that like Venus in Libra, social lubrication, even just a slightly better feeling about everything. That's going to be a little bit delayed because Venus has to square Saturn upon entering Libra, and Saturn's only at 3 degrees, and so Venus will get past Saturn in a couple days. But it's the first thing Venus does is make that square to Saturn, which is bringing up some not necessarily soothing or pleasant issues or bringing a not so soothing quality to things emotionally, right? Because Saturn's great for lots of things. Saturn's not great for ease, luxury, leisure, lubrication, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. It's funny that it runs into that wall almost immediately after ingressing into Libra there in the first few days.
Yeah, that totally ruined a good Venus election that Kate and I were looking at, because the moon conjoins Venus in Libra, but it's still only cleared it by about 5 degrees. It'll probably feel fine as a transit, but it's not unacceptable for an election.
Yeah, there it is around like August
Yeah.
14th.
Yeah.
Yeah. No Venus Saturn squares in my Venus. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, Saturn is such an inhibiting quality that it is going to almost overshadow the potential of what Venus in Libra could offer, but not for the whole time. I think, she does get far enough into Libra that we start to get some of the sweetness and that sense of the lubrication or the idea of collaboration, being able to find common ground or agreement.
Yeah, and it's, one thing to remember is that it's not just Venus in Libra. What we're talking about here is the transition of Venus from the sign in which it's fallen to a sign where it's super strong. And so, part of a lot of July, in addition to spotlighting, in addition to having some very difficult things spotlighted, like Mars retrograde and gnarly eclipse and all that, Venus was also in Libra, or excuse me, Venus was also in Virgo, which meant that Venus was in the sign where she has the toughest time. And so the way that I experience that, and the way I see a lot of people experiencing that, is that it's just harder to find joy in things. It's like harder to appreciate things. It's harder to find common ground with people. All of those Venusian functions are just like there's just not much fuel for that, or you can find it, but you got to kind of work through some stuff. And so this is Venus going from a place where it's tricky to get to the Venus good stuff, to a place where it's abundant and naturally provided.
Definitely, I like that. So all of this is happening, or at least that's starting off in the first part of the month when we get that ingress of Venus into Libra. Just a few days after that, we already have another major. It's one of our major events of the year, which is a solar eclipse that occurs in Leo on August 11th. So this is the continuation of the series that we had that was really prominent a year ago that all of the astrologers were talking about, and that we focused on a lot, which was the Great American Eclipse that occurred, that was actually visible over the United States about a year ago now. And this is the continuation of the same eclipse series, where we actually have a solar eclipse at 19 degrees of Leo that takes place on August 11th, right?
Yeah, it's the night. It's like, so calendar date is the 11th, right? But it's actually then the 11th is a Saturday, but it's actually going to be occurring Friday night, if that makes sense. So if it's not going to happen on Saturday. It's right. It's going to happen the night of the 10th when it becomes, after it becomes the 11th.
To be very explicit and specific.
Yeah. Well, when you write dailies, you got to decide which day to talk about things on.
Totally. Yeah. Because it's like, if you're going to say look up tonight, you need to say that on Friday, not on Saturday, because you will.
Right. Yeah. There's a difference between the experience of days and their numeralization into calendar dates. But yeah, so this is actually, another solar eclipse in Leo, like last year. And this is also, what's worth noting, this is the last solar eclipse in the Leo Aquarius series, right? Because we have there's only one more eclipse in the Leo Aquarius series, which began at the beginning of 2017. And there's one more, which is in the very beginning of, excuse me, at the very beginning of 2019. And there's a full eclipse. There is a lunar eclipse in Leo and
Yeah.
that's it. And then we're done with the Aquarius Leo series. And so this is the last solar, is what I'm
Right.
saying.
Yeah.
Because the nodes are getting so early in Leo and Aquarius at this point that they're getting ready to move out, move back into Cancer and Capricorn, and you can only have eclipses in certain signs when the nodes are moving through those signs.
Right. And so the ones coming up in 6 months are that transitional set where the solar will be in Capricorn, but the lunar will be in Leo, and then it'll move into, being more solidly just Cancer, Capricorn.
For all of next year.
Brilliant. And that actually raises the point that we actually scheduled this episode so that we could do it just after the lunar eclipse, the major lunar eclipse that just occurred a few days ago in Aquarius. Aside from it being like really striking and visible in the sky, I don't really have any commentary on that so far, but do you guys have anything that you noticed worth mentioning?
Well, everything is on fire. Like Europe is on fire. Large parts of the West Coast are on fire. I mean, the West Coast is always on fire, but Sweden is not usually on fire, nor is Greece. This is, I was listening to the news, and I believe that the fire in Greece, or what was said in the news, this is The Economist, was that the fires in Greece are the worst fires since the end of World War II.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's almost like the full moon, or it's almost like the lunar eclipse was conjunct Mars, which is red and considered to be hot and destructive.
Yeah. And there's a note in like the Australian press that bushfire season has come forward by 2 months. So even though it's a little early in Australia for fire season, it's already happening there too. Personally, I definitely felt the Mars South Node, a concept that I've really been wrestling with since Mars came into the sign of the South Node, Aquarius, in an air sign, is this idea of mental angst, or kind of like angry thoughts or dark thoughts, like a heavier mental energy. And I definitely experienced a little bit of that peaking last week with the eclipse, obviously so close to the South Node. And there were a few discussions on Twitter around that as well. So that idea of just everything feeling a little bit electric and fried or frazzled. And within, I think, an hour of the eclipse peaking, that energy started to calm down, even though I had felt it very strongly for 4 or 5 days leading up to it.
Yeah, there was a quality of growing tension for me. There was a quality of growing and tension and angst leading up to the eclipse, and then the eclipse was a little bit of a release. I also did I had a little remediation ritual protocol thing that I did based on some insights that I had the day before the eclipse that worked really well. I actually feel a lot more at peace with the things that are not at peace, if that makes sense.
That's beautiful.
But yeah, I mean, then that's part of the South Node, is the South Node releases.
Yes.
And, sometimes what is released can be very destructive, but it's still release. And I'm a Sun South Node, so I like the South Node. The South Node stuff feels good for me. I know, because I have friends and clients and don't only look at my own chart, that not everybody experiences it that way.
Yeah. So you like letting go of things, Austin? You're not a hoarder?
No, I'm not. I'm definitely not a hoarder. I like the letting go of thinking that, I don't know, reality is so terribly important and my feelings are important and everything's so important. There's definitely like a little bit of an ego dissolution thing that comes with the South Node. It like lets things drop away. And I like that. It feels good to me. It feels like how should we put this? Like returning to the silky void and like floating there a little bit. It's like, oh yes, this is the ground of being, and this is peaceful. And much arises from this and much returns to this, but this is the ground of being, and this feels good. But I don't know, not many people are comforted by the idea of silky voids.
No, that might be a slightly unusual, but I mean, the south node, I think I have Mercury on the south node, and I like the idea of letting go. I'm definitely an overthrower outerer of things. That's not even a word, but hopefully it conveys my meaning. And I always think about that south node from that Buddhist non-attachment perspective of why are we holding on? In the end, it all doesn't matter anyway. So just offer it up or put it back out there and keep going, basically.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, you were born with when there was a solar eclipse on the south node.
Yes.
So, I mean, you're certainly related, but you and I both have stuff on both sides of the nodes.
That's true.
And,
we do.
and so,
Yeah.
like North Node Saturn, perhaps the reason I like release is I hold on really tight and, to Saturn stuff. I'm like, no, I got to do this and this is going to happen and, build myself a little cathedral/prison.
Yeah, the south. So I don't know. Did you notice anything, Chris, with the nodes? Austin and I obviously have some commonalities.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed some letting go stuff that was kind of interesting, just sort of going along with that. But one of the things that always frustrates me is that I know it's through like consultations and like seeing clients over like the next few weeks and looking at some individual stories where you hear the details of people that were hit really specifically or really closely by that transit that you'll see some of the most striking manifestations. And one of the things that's annoying is that sometimes it's not until a long time after that that you'll like have a consultation with somebody where it really lined up closely with their birth chart, and then you'll see like the perfect manifestation of what that transit was about. But some of those stories you don't learn until a long time later. Like I was just watching some, like YouTube always recommends random videos to me, and it recommended one about like a jogger that was like randomly killed a couple of years ago. And I looked up the chart, and she was Saturn in Sagittarius, and she was Saturn returning. And Mars, it happened basically like 2 hours after Mars ingressed into Sagittarius, where it conjoined her natal Saturn at the same time while she was having a Saturn return. So that was that big Mars-Saturn conjunction in Sagittarius that we were talking about a lot on the forecast a couple of years ago. But it was something where it manifested in a very specific and very like drastic way in somebody's life, but we never could have known that until, a long time later when I happened to stumble across it. I feel like there's just like hundreds and thousands of stories like that where if we were aware of them, we'd have a lot of really interesting things to talk about. But, just a day or two later, you often, have not seen all of those stories yet.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that's interesting, though, when people write into us. And so I'd love to hear if there's any listeners that have had any interesting manifestations of either observations they've seen or specific stories in their personal lives about that lunar eclipse that occurred just a few days ago on the 27th and how that's manifested in your life, or if you've seen anything interesting. Because sometimes through like sort of crowdsourcing those stories amongst astrologers, that's the way that we can learn the best as a community about how those things work out.
One of my Patreon supporters, I've got a little forum, we talk about stuff, said that she owns a laundromat, and there were like huge problems with the plumbing and whatnot on the lunar eclipse. And she's like, that has only happened once before, and it was on the previous lunar eclipse.
Wow.
Super interesting.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's literal. I remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that flooding can definitely be, and water damage can totally be a lunar eclipse thing if it's strongly connected to the fourth and other things are set up right. I had that happen one time on a lunar eclipse. It was a lunar eclipse in Gemini on the south node on my moon. And Kate and I's apartment flooded very badly, and we lost a lot of our possessions were destroyed.
Wow.
That's horrible.
And in the chat, because we've got a live chat going for patrons of the Astrology Podcast who are sharing some stories, and Veronica Gledhill's actually got one really interesting literal one where she says, one of my friend's husbands had Mars in the South Node in the first house, and on the day of the conjunction, he discovered he has a giant intestinal parasite. So yeah, that's very, very literal manifestation of that transit. That's a good one. Thanks for sharing that.
Wow, well, that's such an unpleasant discovery, and yet so much better than not knowing, right? Because now you can get rid of it.
Right.
And yeah, yep.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, it always makes me laugh. Like astrologers, sometimes their first reaction is like, always like, wow, that's actually a really interesting manifestation, a very literal manifestation of that transit. And then the second reaction is, oh, that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
But
like,
there's
oh
also,
yeah, I'm a human being. I forgot for a second.
yeah, well, no, it's the almost like scientific or like empirical side of just witnessing the astrology in action and seeing a very specific manifestation that completely fits the archetype and the just how interesting that is like your initial impulse as an astrologer.
Yeah, it's funny,
It's,
right? Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
I, I was just going to say totally. I mean, the amount of times a client will be like, yeah, I decided to break up or what have you. And I'll be like, excellent. Yes. And then I'll be like, oh, no, that's horrible that you had to break up, but it's spot on with this astrological transit or progression or whatever it happens to be. And look, I mean, if you've been in a difficult relationship, sometimes getting out's the best thing because more often than not, the follow-up response from the client is, no, it was a really good thing. So yeah, I totally get it's the instinctive response is like the astrologer researcher versus then the humanity of that would be horrible to go through kind of thing.
Well, and then
Right.
there's the reverse, right? Where a friend tells you something, you're like, oh my God, that's terrible. And then you're like, I wonder what the chart looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and also it's not just completely external either, and it's not just astrologers like gawking at or immediately not having empathy or something, but even in our personal lives, oftentimes the astrologers will immediately be like, even if you have like a really terrible or traumatic event, you'll think about the astrology right away and you'll be like, well, that's at least very good manifestation of that transit, or you'll kind of be impressed by your own how the astrology has worked out very literally, in addition to whatever you're going through at the time in terms of processing and dealing with the actual
It's
hardship
like
itself.
the consolation prize of this is a horrible thing, but at least I understand what this astrological stuff means.
Right. Definitely. All right. So, yeah, so that's a lot of the stuff going on with the eclipses. So we're finally going to be out
Well,
of
so
eclipse season.
we didn't really talk about the one
No,
in the solar in August.
Right. Yeah, we fell back on again, like talking about the lunar eclipse that
we
we've
have to
been
talk
talking
about
about
that.
since December. So this, yeah, solar eclipse in Leo, and this one's interesting because it's actually complemented by a Mercury retrograde that's happening at the same time in the same sign in Leo that's also in effect for most of the month. And Mercury doesn't station direct until later in the month, I believe around the 19th, when it stations direct at 11 degrees of Leo. So during the solar eclipse, at least in terms of if that's hitting an important part of your chart, or if you have placements in Leo or the middle of the fixed signs, you're kind of getting hit by the eclipse happening there, but also Mercury retrograde happening sort of simultaneously.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Well, and fortunately, we do have the Kazemi point, or the inferior conjunction of Mercury and the Sun, right before the eclipse, and that usually helps get a little bit of clarity. That usually helps with getting a little bit of clarity on whatever confusions or rearrangements are necessitated by the Mercury retrograde. It's something.
Yeah, it looks like that happens on August 8th at 16 degrees of Leo.
Yes.
In my horoscope videos yesterday, one of the things I was talking about, it's a realization that I've had about Mercury retrogrades over the past year or so and going through some new ones. And one of the things is that it often forces you, like you'll do something at the beginning of the retrograde, but for some reason it'll get messed up, or it'll turn out that there's a mistake or an error with it, and you'll have to redo it or do the same thing over again. But usually it ends up being constructive, or there's some sort of like positive overall experience that you get out of it. Because typically when you're forced to do the same thing over again a second time, you oftentimes will do a better job the second time than you did the first time around, just because you have more experience with it. So it ends up being, although frustrating and kind of annoying initially, sort of productive overall in the long term, just because you get better at doing whatever it is that you have to do twice, and you sort of grow from it as a person as a result of that typically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is
Yeah,
that
I
like,
think that's true.
that's a pretty, is that a very cliche or like obvious, like Mercury retrograde type insight to provide? This is stuff you guys have written for probably a million times, right?
Yes. You're right. I wouldn't necessarily have added personal growth as a result, but I mean, sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to put the positive spin on it, which you were doing earlier with your how to put a positive, useful spin on this instead of just saying this is going to be annoying. You're going to have to like make a mistake and then repeat it over again, and that's the end of the story. But at least in some instances, let's say perhaps you grow from it or learn from it as a person.
Yeah, or you learn from it, right? Like you said, like the second time you do something, you have more experience than the first time, right? So there's value definitely in being forced to dig into something to solve a problem. You usually have to learn more about a situation than if you didn't have to fix the problem. Like if your audio setup was malfunctioning, you have to go in and look at all of the settings and tweak this, and you learn stuff.
Yeah. You learn what it's like you're learning what you didn't know, but
Yeah.
then also having an opportunity where like repetition is a way to build skill. And because we're talking about Mercury retrograde, repetition is usually it's a helpful thing for building competency with whatever it is you happen to be doing. So yeah, that's
Right. And sometimes like failure or hardship or having to do it over again because that is like an annoying or it's a frustrating process that feels like a hardship at the time, but you end up sometimes at least as a process of repetition gaining greater experience as a result.
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. It's annoying because it takes more time, but often the end result of going over something brings you to a deeper understanding of it. It's frustrating in the moment because you think, I wish I could have been more efficient with that. But we have plenty of time to get efficient at the end of the month when we get into our Virgo season, if you like. Hashtag
Right.
Virgo season.
Hashtag Virgo season.
All right. So this solar eclipse.
Yes.
Solar eclipse.
Austin is not going to let us leave without discussing it. Go,
Right.
Austin.
Trying very
Well,
hard.
I mean,
It's part of a series, so that was the first point you brought up, Austin, that this is not just the end, this is the end, or it's one of the last ones in this series that's been going on for over a year now. So maybe that's the first thing we need to say to help contextualize it, is this is part of a continuing process that keeps happening in 6-month increments that started, you said the first set was in early January of 2017, right?
I think it was February of 2017, but yeah. Yeah, it was, first quarter of 2017 was when we got our first eclipse on the Leo Aquarius axis. And so just a little bit about like North Node in Leo, because this is a North Node. This eclipse is off the North Node. In thinking about this, I'm remembering what I wrote about it last year, and I'm like, oh yeah, why did I forget that? Because a lot of what I've been seeing with North Node in Leo and with the sun on that is ego issues. There's a lot of like I want to be seen as this. I want to get credit for who I am. There's a lot of, and then sort of how people, there's this sort of sandwich of what is the image I am projecting, how are people seeing me, and then what is the image I have of myself. And this seems to be bringing up those three layers, as well as how harmonious or inharmonious their relationships are. Am I like thinking people are seeing me this way, but they're really seeing me that way? There just seems to be a lot of like ego need being seen stuff. And this, because right now the sun is conjoined the North Node. And so the eclipse, the solar eclipse on August 11th will be putting a pin in it. It'll be like, and that's what you were, chewing. That's what you were chewing in your mind. That's what was kind of rolling around and that you were feeling. Although more heart with Leo than mind. But it's definitely feelingsy and a little bit dramatic as it is Leo. So that's some of what I'm seeing, and that's. The solar eclipse, the solar eclipse speaks to the solar level. The lunar eclipse speaks to the lunar level. So this is the last solar eclipse in this series. I think if people look back at how has their identity changed and how has the way that they see themselves and present themselves changed over the last year and a half, you'll see a storyline there that's maybe difficult, easy to miss if you just look at what's going on this moment or this month. I see it as like a shedding and regrowing skin, painting and crafting and then burning masks.
These are really beautiful points that you're making, Austin, around image and appearance and what is presented versus what is, whether the external represents the internal. It's a beautiful way of thinking about it and contextualizing that it's not just the eclipse right now. Take it back to first quarter. It was, I checked, I think it was Feb 2017 was the first eclipses on this Leo Aquarius axis. And the North Node actually moved into Leo. I think it was May 2017, maybe off the top of my head.
That sounds right.
Yeah. The reason it stands out to me is my own personal Leo experience is that within a week or two of that North Node moving into Leo, for the first time, if you've ever kind of known me in real life, I'm very relaxed about my hair in that I don't really go to the hairdresser. I don't wash my hair every 3 days. Like it's very wild and relaxed and casual. But for the first time ever, I actually went to the hairdresser. I had my hair dyed, got some of my grays addressed within a couple of weeks of the North Node going into Leo last year. I haven't done it since, it was totally like a one-off thing, but it was sort of this interesting experiment that I had around what is it like if my hair doesn't have its grays, for instance. I was also getting ready to go to my Leo sister's very Leo wedding and thought I should have some decent hair for the photos. But it's an interesting little piece around, like, do you need to do this or can you just be who you are, basically? And I'm relaxing into the grays now.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like you become aware of the image that you're presenting. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need to change it, but new awareness of that, you're like, well, now this is a question rather than just something that always happens that way.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to hear if anyone else had any other suitably Leo things that they're working through. And then the wrap up, because this is our last solar eclipse in Leo, which feels obviously really significant.
Yeah, I think it's going to make some of the changes which have been ongoing for a while conscious. I think people will be like, oh, this is part of a process that I kind of forgot was happening. Because that's the nodes, right? The nodes take a year and a half-ish to transit a pair of signs. So, a transit from the nodes is longer than Jupiter.
Yes.
And so whenever we have transits that are that long, it just becomes normal. Like that's just life. We kind of forget, oh, this is happening because Jupiter's transiting my fifth or whatever. And so the nodes are even longer, and the eclipses, I think, take the latent significations of the nodes and they bring them into the foreground, for a couple weeks.
Yeah. And the other interesting point about the significance of this eclipse as maybe a full stop at the end of the Leo Aquarius eclipses is that between this eclipse and the next eclipse season in January of 2019, the nodes themselves will change signs. So that the next time we deal with eclipse energy, the nodes will be in Cancer and Capricorn. So it's very much the end of that Leo Aquarius trend from the nodes.
Well, there is one more eclipse in Leo.
But the nodes will be in Cancer Cap at the time.
Yeah, it's sort of a one last thing. It's like before you go, one last thing, boom. And that'll be like the final thing. But I think it'll probably feel pretty complete after this one that's happening in August. There'll just be a little PS in January.
P.S. Leo loves you.
Maybe that which is initiated or like has to be initiated that's going to have long-term implications will become fully initiated, or those seeds will be fully laid at this eclipse, especially since it's a new moon solar eclipse at this time. Yeah,
I would say it's so with lunar. I look at lunar in terms of more material and emotional, and solar in terms of intelligence and ego. I think the conscious half of it will be the conscious half of ending this process. You know, the egoic as well as the intelligent, discerning part will get dropped by the solar this month, and then there'll be a final shift of emotions and perhaps resources depending on the houses involved during the lunar in 6 months.
Definitely. One of the things I noticed about eclipses is that sometimes for like a solar eclipse, it seems like it starts or initiates a new phase in your life or a new series of activities in the house that it falls in. But oftentimes it's not like readily apparent to you at the time how important that new beginning is going to end up being until later on in retrospect. But it's something that sort of starts out slowly or sometimes has very humble beginnings, but then later snowballs into something more important. So these Leo eclipses, it always makes me think like 10 years ago, there was another set of Leo eclipses. And I always relate eclipses to the houses primarily to see like what area of the life it's developing in the person's life. And I was just like, over the summer, I started like a new relationship, and it was supposed to be like this blow off relationship. And neither of us thought it would be a big deal, but I happened to notice there was an eclipse happening in my 7th house. And I was like, well, that's weird, because that almost implies maybe this relationship will be more important than I think it's going to be, you know, currently, where neither of us are that invested in it or think it's going to last for more than a few months. And we both went into it knowing that, but then 10 years later, I turn around and I'm still in the same relationship that started when I had that solar eclipse in Leo in my 7th house. And that's always been one of those like sort of lessons for me about what solar eclipse can sometimes do, is sort of start or lay the foundations or the seeds for something in a certain area of your life that you don't realize is going to be as important or as long-term until you turn around in retrospect and it's something that's built or grown into something bigger sort of a few years or a few months down the line.
I remember looking at those eclipses with you 10 years ago.
Yeah, because we were talking about it. We're like, well, that's weird. It's happening in my 1st house and my 7th house. And there is this small thing happening, but surely that's not going to be a major deal.
Yeah. Well, eclipses, they do have that more, I think that they're tied into the longer trend. I think maybe Austin, you sort of said this earlier, or maybe Chris, that it's not just about the eclipse right now. It's how it participates in an 18 months to 2 year period that feeds into this longer thread. And the house activation is so critical, because they do get activated every 9 to 10 years by the time we get the nodes reversing.
Side note or digression, have you guys ever had anything like that where not necessarily that you miscalled it, but that you sort of like saw something and didn't realize how significant will be, so then maybe you misjudged the significance or how major the transit was going to be until later in retrospect?
I'm sure I have. No good examples jump to mind.
I mean, the more common thing, of course, for astrologers, I think, is the opposite, which is seeing a transit coming up, especially a negative one, and sometimes like overestimating how significant or how bad it's going to be. But then it comes and goes, and it turns out like there's something that happened, but you got through it and it wasn't the end of the world.
Yeah, I think that's probably true with astrologers.
Yes.
Sure.
I do have to get clear on a few bloopers, because one of the panels at the SOTA conference this year, they're doing a panel where they've asked a few of us to speak on when we've got it wrong and to share, you know, what we thought would happen and what actually happened, and just to kind of dissect the fact that, you know, we do make mistakes. So I'll have some better answers on that later this year.
I think that's a great idea for a panel.
Right? Like, it's going to be, I'm really looking forward to it, actually. Yeah.
Cool. All right. And when is that? That's in October, right?
Yeah, the SOTA conference, it's mid-October, 18th to the 22nd of October in Buffalo, in New York. So don't come for the weather, but come for the fun and friendship.
Right. If you're going for the weather, then there's another conference happening in May that I think I just got the invite to it. So the Northwest Astrological Conference is happening in Seattle at the end of May in 2019. And I have to come up with lecture descriptions for it, I think in the next like 48 hours. So I'm kind of scrambling here.
Shit, thanks for reminding me. I haven't done that either.
Yeah, you've got a deadline as well.
Yeah, 1st of August. And you got to be on time with NORWAC because it's run by Miss Saturn herself. No late submissions allowed. I forgot about that. I'm so glad you're going to be there, Chris. Are you coming, Austin?
I'll probably come. I totally forgot that there was that deadline.
Okay.
Did you you got invited to speak?
I'm not even sure.
Why was the deadline be relevant? If you know about the deadline or it's relevant.
Oh, okay. So it's not the application deadline.
No. Well,
Okay.
NORWAC is usually an invitation, although if you email, like you could submit for consideration in June or July, like when things are being considered. Yeah.
I still haven't gotten through all of my emails over the last couple of months because I got so much stuff
You
after
have an
NORWAC.
invitation they're waiting to be attended to.
Yeah, I found invitations to a couple things that, from like 2 months ago that I never responded to. I was like, dear sir or madam or other conscious being, I apologize for the delayed response. Thank you very much. But this is why I stepped back from my work schedule because I was getting, super behind.
Well, I'm thinking about doing another live podcast event at the conference, either as a workshop, like a post-conference workshop, or as an event one night. So I think if we can get all three of us there, we should think about that or plan on doing that. And people should mark their calendars if they're interested in attending something like that, because we'll be doing it one way or another at the end of May in Seattle next year.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Very cool.
All right. So back to the forecast. Do we have anything else to say about this solar eclipse? Did we sufficiently cover the main points?
I'm good. Austin?
I think Austin's taking a brief
Oh,
break,
he's
running to
stepped
grab
away.
something, and he'll be right back.
He'll be right back. So if he's gone, then we can move on. He must be happy with it.
Austin's gone, and will let us move on from the eclipse.
Because the very next day, that's when Mars retrogrades back into Capricorn.
Yeah, and that's huge. So that's one of the major signatures this month is Mars, which stationed retrograde last month in Aquarius, officially on August 12th, retrogrades back into Capricorn, where eventually it will station direct at the very end of the month at 28 degrees of Capricorn on August 28th. So this becomes one of the major signatures of the month because we have Mars basically retrograding back and then hovering around the same degrees at the very end of Capricorn for pretty much the entirety of the second half of the month.
Yeah, and I think this is really going to change the astro vibe. I mean, Mars moving out of Aquarius into Capricorn, we're going from air into earth. So it's a more, potentially a little bit more stable, but certainly a more grounded version of this Mars retrograde. So there is going to be a shift in the quality or the experience of the Mars retrograde, in addition to the fact that if you are using a whole sign house system in your charts, Mars is going to retrograde into a whole other house as well. So Mars is escaping the South Node influence, so that intense purification and letting go kind of subsides a bit. Mars is moving back into the sign with Saturn and Pluto, but Mars in Capricorn, it is bringing Mars back into its exaltation sign. So it's not that I want to suggest we all have high hopes from that, but I think it's a little bit more of a productive energy. And it's actually one of my main events for how August kind of gets split into two, with the Mars in an air sign before the 12th and then Mars in the earth sign afterwards.
I agree with the month being split in two. It felt like that to me too when I looked over it.
Yeah, and that stationing Mars, is a little bit more tense because we've got that happening in the second half of the month, and the actual station not happening until August 28th, which is the most intense part of that transit. But also the full moon in Pisces occurs right towards the end of the month as well, I believe, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's a relatively lovely full moon. Especially, actually, I like the day after the full moon better than the full moon.
In general,
why
or
is that?
specifically this month, Austin?
Oh, specifically this month.
Because of the Mars direct, or why? Tell us more.
Well, no, just so the full moon occurs at
the trine to Jupiter.
Yeah, the full moon occurs at 3 Virgo, the sun at 3 Virgo, and the moon full at 3 Pisces. And so we have a configuration to Saturn and Uranus, which are at 2, well, they're both at 2 Capricorn and Taurus. But if you just look at the next day after the moon, you get like a fun moon-Neptune conjunction, trine Jupiter, as far as like a nice looking day. But we should tell you that's less important than the full moon itself. Just saying, it's cool. It's a nice day.
No, you're totally right, Austin. I think actually Caitlin has already been sharing insights and reminding us on Twitter. I'm totally giving a shout out to the Astro Twitter crew here. But yeah, it's a nice full moon, and B, the relationship to Jupiter from the full moon is definitely helpful. But we wanted to talk about Mars station. Sorry, Chris. We jumped in on the moon stuff.
Yeah, only just the intensification of that transit as being the most important at that time. But also, as we mentioned, I think maybe it was in the pre-show chat that, of course, in talking about this in the context of the horoscopes this month, we all had to remind people that Mars, because this is a retrograde, it's actually returning back to a spot in the zodiac that had already transited earlier this year. So whatever energies it does bring up at that time are probably going to be a reminder or a return to something that was sort of left unfinished from earlier this year.
Yeah, definitely.
So when was that it passed like 28 degrees of Capricorn?
First half of May.
First half of May. Okay. So it looks like, yeah, very early May.
Or the 5th or something. It's almost like a recollection, like collecting something that you kind of put on the shelf back in May, or resurrecting something that you started and then got sidetracked from. It's certainly that sense of like reconnecting or a resonance with the early May period. And then something from back then needs to be brought forward as you go forward from this end of August period.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I already know what that is for me. When the Mars Saturn co-presence started in Capricorn, I was this perfectly organized, how do you put it? War machine of productivity. And I had my like schedule out in which hours on which days I was doing which activities. I was like working out like crazy, getting a bunch done. And then by the time I got into May, the wheels had kind of started to fall off. And then since then, since Mars's ingress into Aquarius, like I've sort of not been able or not wanted to get back into hyper-productive mode. But having just passed the midway point in Mars's retrograde right now, I can totally feel that coming back, and the sort of my orientation switching towards, getting back to being a war machine of productivity. I can feel the desire increasing already. And that was exactly the timeline for that.
That's super interesting. So hopefully that helps listeners to have a think about, that early May period. You could get as specific as looking at the Capricorn house in your chart, but definitely thinking about, as Austin was sharing, maybe where the wheels fell off a little bit for you in early May, and then the experience, whatever's happened between now and then, might give you a little bit of that sense of, this is how I could do that better moving forward.
Yeah, well, and like you said, Chris, like when you have to do it over again, you know how to do it right the next time. And I can feel that. I'm like, okay, so I'm going to make these changes to my schedule, and I won't try to do that, but I will do this, and I'll wake up at this time, et cetera, et cetera. There's one of the images, ideas, metaphors that I've been thinking about the Mars retrograde through, because it kind of feels this way, is this like pulling back the bow. Right. And for me, especially during Mars direct stations, I'm always like, yes, I know exactly what I'm doing for the first time in 4 months. I'm unconflicted about what needs to be done, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. It's like, boom. It's that release of the tension. but you can't fire an arrow without drawing back the bow, or you can, but you just drop it on the ground, or you do like a bad throw and it doesn't go very far.
It doesn't. I mean, the arrow, the setting up for a shot in tennis or golf or something, it's that idea that, it's not just the striking of the ball or the releasing of the arrow. It's what you do beforehand to make sure that the ball or arrow goes to the target that you have in mind.
Right. With the exact angle of intersection you want, like with tennis, right?
Yes.
It's not just hit it. It's hit it, make sure its angle and your angle are just perfect.
And if you're not sure what I mean, just Google on YouTube, Roger Federer, top 10 best shots ever. And you'll get some great example of the importance of precision with the direction.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about Mars stationing direct in its exaltation. This is just to take a step back into years and this little period of history. This is a tough stretch of road, this end of the of this decade, and although objectively the virtues of softness and hardness are not superior or inferior to each other, this particular stretch of road, or this particular period of time, especially with Saturn and Capricorn, feels like it's requiring some harder virtues out of people. There's a lot of like needing to toughen up and get through it and get it done, despite the fact that history appears to be drunk. And so I don't know, I feel like on one level, just Mars direct in Capricorn is like exactly what we all need.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, when I was interpreting this within the context of like the whole sign house it was falling in, that was one of the things that became clear to me, or that I ended up focusing on, was just Mars returning back to Capricorn is not just a return of Mars in and of itself, like transiting that house in your chart, but it's returning back to a sign that already contains Saturn and Pluto. So where it's like people are already dealing with like some long-term, somewhat heavy transits through that sector of the chart or through that area of their life, but then there's a sudden like return back to and introducing or reintroducing this sort of energy of Mars for a brief period of time of a few weeks here in August and September, which kind of like intensifies or can create some additional potential for strife and conflict in that specific area of the life. And while there might be something that's cathartic about that, or where there's like a release of energy, sometimes the return of that energy could be a little bit problematic to deal with, in terms of having to return back to sort of a conflict, or return back to something that you already went through, where you sort of had it out, but it's sort of left unfinished. And for some people that might be a bit problematic in the short term.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's not, from a certain perspective, you don't need to call Mars in if everything's going great. Like, you don't need, a planet with swords and fire. If like things are cool, right? You don't need a sword unless somebody attacks you, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes, I've seen a lot of Mars direct stations. They bring an end to a conflict, they finish it, but sometimes the finishing is, and now we're definitely broken up, or now we are no longer business partners. And that, again, that's like Kelly, you were talking about, we talked a little bit about this with the Mars eclipse thing, is like, in retrospect, like, it's a good thing that relationship was severed, but in the moment, it's not super exciting and doesn't necessarily overflow with, warm, luxurious feels.
Not at all. And I had actually picked the period from August 21st to August 23rd, when the moon moves through Capricorn, joining the Mars, Saturn, Pluto piece, as
Nice
in the
call.
same. And I thought of you this morning, Austin, when I was doing up my moon power dates, which are included in my Stellar Insights Monthly. I was like, yeah, this is an unhappy moon. There's some frustration. She's just stuck with all three of these cronies for a few days. And I think that even though there's no other thing happening there other than the moon moving through that same sign, it's just really going to bring those Mars retrograde events and that Mars at the end of Capricorn. It's really just going to bring a lot of that home for people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the questions people might ask is in terms of what house that's transiting in your chart, was there anything, a positive or sort of constructive confrontation that you had months ago that wasn't fully resolved that you need to return to in order to finish once and for all, or where something was left undone and still needs to be addressed by sort of returning back to it, while at the same time doing so in a way that's like measured and appropriate and not going too far, or not incurring a sort of separation in your life that's worse than it needs to be by sort of aggravating the situation rather than just like appropriately addressing an issue that's tense, but that otherwise still needs to be addressed.
Yeah, well, and that's I think that when Mars is, especially is when any planet's in its exaltation, it seems to do clean work where it accomplishes its planetary function very efficiently. I think Mars in its exaltation is very much the clean kill or the clean break.
I want to throw a classically Kelly positive out there on this, because this will be happening for me. I have a Capricorn 11th house, and within a couple of days of Mars ingressing into Capricorn earlier this year, like mid to late March, I reconnected with two very old dear astrology friends who had kind of lost a bit of touch with. And we formed this WhatsApp group like just a couple of days after Mars went into Capricorn in my 11th house. And we basically like have not stopped talking ever since. It's like, the friendship that we first started in our 20s has just been able to reconnect, even though we're all now in different cities and some of us have got kids and all that jazz. And on this period in August, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, the three of us are actually all going to be meeting up together in the same city in Australia for the first time in years. So that's something that I'm super excited about. And it's subjectively, I'm happy about this. It's a positive. So I just wanted to throw that in there, that depending on your own chart, I mean, it's very specific to the house this is happening in for me, because it's 11th house and it's friendships and it's reconnecting with old friendships. So it's kind of tying in the Mars activation with the longer Saturn in Cap trend. I just pulled all this together now. I was like, oh, that's the time I'm going up to Queensland to see Leish and Cass. So that's something, it could be a little bit happy for some people.
Yeah, well, so I would be surprised if you don't end up being like, we should do something with this. Like there's a very like
on the cards.
Right. So that's what I was talking about with like, the war machine, right? Like, like, no, this is awesome. This can kick ass. Like, and then the moving forward from there, inspecting your tank is part of like that's what the moon's doing, is it's looking at all this, all this stuff. It's like, no, this thing's got legs. This has power. Right.
This has some staying power, because I do think, not to speak so much about myself now, but the idea that the Mars in Saturn combination, Mars in Capricorn, Saturn in Cap, the togetherness there, the co-presence, this is really setting us up for the next 2 years of the Saturn in Cap transit. There's a hardening, and the hardening can be about ordering and organization, the idea of the clarity that goes with if we form and strengthen here, then we can be more productive or effective in other areas.
Definitely 100% agree.
That's actually really important, because I just noticed, and I didn't realize this previously because I was confining myself to only looking at August, but Saturn's really close to stationing, and it stations direct in very early Capricorn at the very beginning of September.
Yeah.
So that kind of re-emphasizes what you're saying there, Kelly, in terms of setting things up for the longer term Saturn transit over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and Mars will still be in late Cap. I know they're not connected by degree, but they are kind of just vibing in the same place.
Yeah, definitely. They're co-present, right? They're roommates in the same house. They're just, their rooms are on opposite sides of the structure. But just one thing I wanted to say about that full moon in Pisces.
Oh yeah.
Pretty chill. Like that'll be the first non-eclipsed lunation since June. And not only that, if we just look at the lunations over this season, so we talked about the solar eclipse in Leo, and which happens in August, and then before that was the lunar eclipse in Aquarius, and before that was a slight but still real solar eclipse in Cancer, and before that was a full moon tightly conjunct Saturn. So we have had a rough series of lunations, and that string is broken by this full moon in Pisces. It's interesting because it's got a really tight sextile to Uranus and a really tight sextile to Saturn. If you're into midpoints, the full moon is on the Uranus-Saturn midpoint. And that's interesting in that actually suggests, like, to me, especially with it being timed around Mars's direct station, also in an Earth sign, changing things physically, like rearranging the way your money works, or rebuilding a section of your house, or moving around real things. We've got that Saturn structure, that Uranus change, both in Earth signs, and then the moon receiving that, but the moon in a good place, in a fecund place in Pisces. Receiving that. And so, like, yeah, that's not like the perfect piece full moon, but it's the best lunation we've had in a long time.
It absolutely is. And Austin, just to be really explicit on what you're speaking to here, on the 25th of August, the sun will go through to Virgo and activate this sort of temporary grand trine configuration, where this is also kind of as close as the Saturn and Uranus trine gets. And the sun kind of pulls that in, and then we have the lunation. So it's kind of a full few days on that last weekend in August. But I've said exactly the same thing to my tribe, Austin, the idea of that grand trine configuration. We are rearranging the moving pieces, the material, the money, the body, the environment. It's all those physical components that need a bit of a refresh. Or a restructure or reset of some kind.
Yeah, and maybe an update.
We need to run some new software, basically.
Yeah, and it's this, but it's like you said, it's like the software of where things actually are. Like what I'll probably end up doing is totally rearranging my office. I've had like things that I was going to do for a while. It's like, buy a new bookshelf. These books go in the shelf. That shelf goes in the southeast corner of the room. Right, like it's solid like that.
There's tangible and there's substance, and something is physically different afterwards than what it was before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I did want to make one point about the full moon fixed star connection.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
We cannot not talk about the fact that this full moon is conjunct a royal star, conjunct Fomalhaut. Which
what
is the star.
Is that at?
It's 3 Pisces, basically.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah. So it is a little bit more of a dull star. Like, it's not the brightest of the royal stars. It's associated with that sort of winter energy. But one of my favorite things about Fomalhaut is it's about the idealism that clashes with mainstream thinking. And this can go a little bit either way, where there's that sense of we're totally idealistic and unrealistic, versus we've got some ideals that can inspire like a shift in perspective or even a change in behavior.
That's true. So I have Mars natally on that star. And I love that star. That was probably one of my favorite stars to talk about in my star class. The way I agree with everything you said, what I would add is that it has this like poet wizard energy.
Totally.
And it's sort of like, it's like getting access to fairyland or being kidnapped. And then do you bring something real back from that or not? I've thought about, like, just in terms of the royal stars and what they do, like, how do they grant a person being of the first rank, right? Now, Aldebaran is, the Eye of the Bull is like this sturdy, enduring, what's the word? Like vigorous, builder and changer of the world. And Regulus is Regulus. Regulus is like the super famous, it's the royal part of the royal stars. It's just, it's big and everybody can see it. And it gives courage to assert oneself. Right. And then there's Antares, right? And Antares, the heart of the scorpion, it grants eminence by being victorious in battle. Right. It makes you, impossible to kill, and even, and unwilling to ever admit defeat. It's tough. And so when I was thinking about this, those are all really kind of easy to see how they grant eminence. But with Fomalhaut, you're imaginative. It's like the famous artist, or like should we say, like the court poet, or the wizard at the court. It grants eminence through more artistic, magical sort of excellence, rather than like a tough stuff, or just super performative quality like some of the other stars.
Absolutely, it is. I mean, I always think of the winter season as like it's the mystical royal star. It's the one that gives talent or skill in the magical arts, if you like.
There's there is one of the most famous mixed martial artists. It's a guy named Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva, and he's the Muhammad Ali. He's just amazing. He's like, silky smooth, poetry in motion. And I looked at his chart, and he's got a Mars Fomalhaut conjunction, and I was like, there it is, like giving art to his Mars, which made him famous.
Absolutely. And a really simple way for people who are newer to these fixed star concepts and ideas is to think about that 3-degree marker in Pisces as the best type of the most classic Pisces energy that you could imagine. It's like uber productive, magical, mystical, the poetry, the creativity, the talent, the skill that has that otherworldly component to it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so in this case, it's going to be very much in service to that practical, pragmatic grand Earth trine.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key, is that, I mean, from a chart shape thing, it's like a kite that's forming, but that creates more of a productive component. So I really like this last couple of days, like this last weekend in August, with what's coming through with the Mars station. It feels like some unfolding and the final piece or pieces that help you move forward in a substantial way from there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just contrast it to the earlier part of the month, right? We have like it's a not crap lunation, and right. And then Mercury's direct, and Mars is going direct.
Mars is going direct. Yeah.
And Venus.
Libra.
Yeah. Like this is, this is good stuff.
It's very juicy. And then, of course, just the sign-based support that Jupiter is giving to the lunation, which is in a Jupiter sign. So
yeah. And Jupiter's direct and in a water sign. And yeah.
Very fertile. Like, I think you used the word fecund. It's very fertile. There's a lot of this sort of growth energy there. It's very lush.
Well, and that water, that, big watery moon, really, it helps the grand Earth trine from getting dried out.
Yes, keeps it very wet, keeps the ground wet so something can grow in a flourishing way, and in a faster way, because that's what moisture gives.
Yeah, and in like an imaginative way, because sometimes when you're rearranging, like if you're rearranging your office, like the example I gave, you can do that because you have to. You're like, yeah, really, this would be better if I did that. It's boring. But then that same activity can also be inspired. Be like, oh, and then it's going to be like this, and
then the energy will feel better, and it'll be more aligned, or the feng shui, or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the Pisces moon gives that practical rearrangement, that like nice quality.
So shout out to Pisces moons.
Yeah, shout out to Pisces moons.
It's funny that you guys mentioned all of this, because this is actually the election for this month that Lisa should pick out for us. It's actually August 26th.
Fine.
Yeah, that's really funny, actually. I'll have to let her know that you guys approved of this election and you sung it high praises before I even showed you the chart. So this month it's set for August 26, 2018 at about 7:30 p.m. Local time, which here in Denver, Colorado gives about 1 degree of Pisces rising. So we had a couple of charts. There was another possible chart as our top pick of the month. It was a Leo rising election with the sun in Leo and the sun right on the ascendant a little earlier in the month, but it had some drawbacks. So we decided to go with this chart as the main one we're recommending this month. And this is it's a Pisces rising chart. So you want about the first degree or two of Pisces rising. So this is happening right around sunset because the sun is at 3 degrees of Virgo at this point. So it's still a day chart, but it has Pisces rising with Jupiter in Scorpio in the ninth whole sign house. And the moon is in Pisces in this chart at about 10 degrees of Pisces, and it's applying to a trine with Jupiter with reception with the moon itself in Pisces. So this is the part of the purpose of this chart is to take advantage of, now that we're in the part of the year where Jupiter has stationed direct in Scorpio, it's going to make its way out of Scorpio just a few months from now, later this year. So we've got to start, if we find a good chart where we can really take advantage of that Jupiter in Scorpio, where it's otherwise not afflicted by any inner planets, it's a good time to take advantage of it while we still can, now that it's direct again. So it's a very ninth house focused chart, but it has a lot of those qualities that you guys were talking about in terms of the wateriness with the moon and Jupiter sort of as the focal points in Pisces and Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, selfishly, because I'll be in Australia, I'm like, how does this translate down under? And it looks like it'll be the day after, the 27th, around maybe 5 or 6 in the evening. Just double. Do you want an early Pisces rising, Chris, for this? Was that the goal, or just any degree rising?
No, I mean, there is a question here about whether to make it a day chart or a night chart. We lean more towards a day chart. So that creates a very narrow time window so that you have to make sure that you have at least only 1 or 2 degrees of Pisces rising, which is kind of tricky because Pisces actually rises very quick as a rising sign. So you have to make sure that you get that window pretty precisely. And we have it set for 7:30 here because that's when 1 degree of Pisces is rising in Denver, but you need to adjust the time so that the ascendant is at 1 degree of Pisces in whatever your location is. And that's really part of the main point of this chart, to keep it a day chart. That way Jupiter is of the sect in favor. It's a benefic, a daytime planet in a day chart. You could make it a night chart because one of the downsides is that Mars or Jupiter is then ruled by Mars, which is stationing direct in the 11th in a day chart, but at least it's exalted in Capricorn. It has a nice relationship with Jupiter and Venus. And so that's one of the reasons we lean towards more of a day chart rather than a night chart.
Lovely. So very early Pisces rising, 0, 1 or 2 degrees to keep the sun right on the descendant. Yeah.
And also great. to make sure, it's also good in terms of making sure that the moon is applying to Jupiter in a day chart rather than Jupiter in a night chart, just in order to further accentuate the positiveness of that sort of reception between the moon being in Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter, and applying to it by making Jupiter a little bit more benefic.
Absolutely. Great. So that's totally replicatable in Sydney.
Right. Oh, it is. Okay. In Sydney. That's one of the tricky things.
I was looking at, it's basically August 27th at around 5:20 p.m. And that'll give you 2 Pisces rising, which is, the moon is maybe, she's at 12 or 13 degrees Pisces. So she's still in the same application.
Okay. So still applying to Jupiter.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to, because sometimes when you change the location so differently, you can't get the moon application, but because it's a longer application here, it totally works.
Yeah, that's an issue we run into, and that's why we didn't go with the other Leo rising election, I believe, because it was applicable in all time zones except for the west coast of the United States. So we decided to not make that our primary election this month because it wouldn't be usable by the entire western coast. So this chart's actually funny also because this is basically very similar to a core part of the chart of the astrologer Robert Zoller, who was born with Pisces rising and Jupiter in Scorpio and the moon in Pisces in a day chart applying to a trine with Jupiter. So it's kind of like this chart is like a little Robert Zoller talisman, you might say. What would be your delineation, Austin, for, because I always think of Zoller as like a mystical guy into occult arts like astrology, but also other things like alchemy and things like that, which I always thought was very fitting of his ruler of the ascendant in the 9th house. And he becomes like the astrologer known for doing medieval astrology during the early revival of older forms of astrology in the 1980s and 90s, as well as one of the few astrologers that became associated with some of the predictions that he made about 9/11. What's your general take on how would you delineate that with the ruler of the ascendant in the ninth in Scorpio?
For this election?
Yeah, or just in general.
So I mean, yeah, the ninth house in Hellenistic astrology and in other astrologies, but it's very clear in the Hellenistic, is where you see magic, religion, prognostication, such as through astrology, right? You read through Firmicus, and it's like, oh, like for me, I have the sun in the ninth house. He's like, oh yeah. So what you should do is you would be really happy working in the temple, constructing divine images, right? Because, you know, sun, visibility, and image, ninth.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, Saturn in the ninth, you'd be great at keeping the temple clean and making sure the ceremonies run on time. Also, you'd be not bad at interpreting dreams, right? So the ninth is, you know, the ninth is also more mundane things like taking a trip, but the ninth is it's the house where you see spiritual work and spiritual power. And so to a certain degree, the ninth, and this is an idea that I think you can find in Western strands of astrology, but is more explicit in Vedic astrology, is the ninth. The ninth is also a lucky place. It's just lucky, right? You know, to a certain degree, that's what magic aims at, is to create a very specific kind of luck so that this will go well or this will happen, right? And so Jupiter is obviously a nice fit for the ninth, and it's direct and uninflicted, ruling the first. That's beautiful. If I'm not correct, or if I'm not incorrect with Zoller, I believe he had a Mercury, Mars, Sun conjunction in Aquarius. Has. He's still with us on this plane.
You're right.
And so for that, there you have the ruler of the ninth in the 12th with the sect light. And so, you know, the ruler of the ninth and the 12th is going to take you even deeper into mysteries, right? That linkage of the ninth and 12th. But anyway.
And that's nice. I've heard some very negative interpretations of the ruler of the ninth and the 12th. I like your one better.
Oh, I think it's going to not be as good for material things and luck, but I think it will be. It would serve quite nicely on a, you know, spiritual esoteric level.
That's really cool.
Yeah, ninth house, like ruler of the ascendant in the ninth type stuff is always funny to me because oftentimes, or sometimes you do get like major religious themes coming up in the person, or the person being very interested in metaphysical or philosophical or religious things. But then, you know, in some of the Hellenistic texts, it's funny because it sometimes delineates like negative placements there as problems or struggles with religion or skepticism about it. And when I did a lot of my research for this and putting together a lecture on the ruler of different houses, like the ruler of the ascendant in the ninth, one of the ones that was funny of there was like a major astrology skeptic who ended up having like Saturn there in the ninth in a night chart. And I
was just going to bring that up. I was literally going to bring that up with Firmicus. I was getting Firmicus open. Please go on. I'm very excited. We are literally on the same page.
Yeah, well, I just was always fascinated by that. So I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was the chart of Jeffrey Dean, who was like a major astrology skeptic, and who supposedly his story is that he was an astrologer, or he was somewhat into astrology, but then later decided it was false. And so sort of dedicated his career to critiquing or attacking it. And that's such an interesting manifestation then of having that placement in the ninth house as being something that you're sort of skeptical about the topic of that house, or where you struggle with it in some way, and manifesting in a very literal way like that.
So can I just read you one paragraph, which is Firmicus delineating Saturn in the ninth by day and then by night?
Yeah. Because
it's hilarious. Okay. Saturn in the ninth. Saturn in the ninth house will make famous magicians, renowned philosophers, or temple priests noted for their reputation for magic. According to the nature of the signs, he also makes seers, diviners, and astrologers. They are always outstanding in their responses. Some, some carry on the rites of temples or are in charge of rituals. Sometimes they become long-haired philosophers or interpreters of dreams. However, Saturn in this house by night indicates the wrath of gods and hatred of emperors, especially if the waning moon is moving toward him in any way. But greater evils still are predicted from gods and emperors if Mars from any direction is an aspect to Saturn and the moon. So the reason my mind went to that is I did an article for the Mountain Astrologer, I don't know, 6-7 years ago about the chart of Marilyn Manson, and he has Saturn in the ninth with the waning moon applying to Saturn. And if you want to, like, somebody who is hated by God, the wrath of gods and emperors, this is someone who was literally billed himself as the Antichrist superstar. And who authority figures everywhere hated, people protested his stuff. But I thought that was I thought it was amazing because, and you see, like, to call him sacrilegious is an understatement in the extreme, right? But so you see the wrath of gods and anger at God or gods, the hatred of emperors, like people who are ruling. But that was what made him famous. Like, that's true, but that was actually the key to his eminence. And it's just, it's a funny thing where it's exactly as it is in the book, but different.
Yeah, I always appreciate that and love that when you have like ancient, sometimes very literal and sometimes very like stark or extreme delineations like in the old textbooks from like 2,000 years ago, and then seeing somebody with that placement in modern times having a manifestation of it that fits it very perfectly from an archetypal sense, but still puts a modern or a unique spin on it that is sort of unique in some way.
Yeah, or just like, and it would be fun to go back to his chart, but like, obviously the planets involved there are keys to eminence, or they're part of eminence combinations or Raja yogas for him. And so being hated was the key to his success.
Right. Yeah, and he has like the ruler of the ascendant, like applying to that with reception and all sorts of other weird things.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so this is an election like that. It's very much ninth house focused. So I think it would be a good time. One of the things that like a ninth house pursuit would be like education, and with the ruler of the ascendant being in the ninth house in Scorpio, maybe like a beginning an educational focus or pursuit, especially of a more scorpionic nature of, like occult things or something like that would be a great sort of symbolic use of this election.
Yeah, getting into something, starting a course of study. But again, I think that the ninth house is also just, especially Jupiter in the ninth direct and unafflicted, is there's also just like a general or global, this is useful for a lot of things. But I would say that I would agree totally that it would be especially useful for something of that nature.
Well, and especially it's for serious things and doing things in a very deliberate and doing a sort of deep dive educational pursuit into something where you're not like just sort of scratching the surface, but you're sort of going all the way as far as you can in terms of pursuing some course of study or looking into something, I guess, more broadly speaking.
Right. And so what I want to say immediately, which I realize is so Pisces moon, is immersing yourself.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, immersing, locking yourself away with all your knowledge. It can be, if we're talking from an electional perspective where you consciously choose to do something at this time. So signing up for a course, starting to work with a mentor. But it could also be that, if you're out and about at this time of day, you might stumble across something that becomes influential or motivating or inspiring or aspirational for you.
Yeah, definitely. This would be a great time to start a research project.
Totally. Or maybe start writing something.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right. So that's our auspicious electional chart for August. We actually have 3 other charts that Lisa found this month that we're going to talk about in the Auspicious Elections podcast, which is available to patrons who support the show on the $5 and $10 tiers. So we'll be recording and releasing that tomorrow, I believe. So all you need to do is sign up to become a patron through our page on Patreon, and then you can get access to that each month as soon as it's released. So yeah, I think that's it for the elections, and that kind of brings us to the end of this month. I think we accidentally went way over time, and that the clock is telling me it's been 2.5 hours, and I don't quite believe that. That seems a little long, but apparently we've been doing this for quite a while.
We had a lot of fun, and time flies when you're doing that.
Yeah, there were some interesting side roads that we explored.
Sure, we were even more digressive than usual this month, but that's all right.
Yeah, Mercury's retrograde, right?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, anything else to close up? So definitely in terms of listeners, let me know, because I'm trying to come up with lecture topics, and maybe this applies to you also, Kelly. If you guys have any suggestions for lecture topics you'd like us to see us do at NORWAC next year, like in person giving lectures, let us know, because Kelly and I will both be scrambling to come up with those topics over the next few days before the deadline. So we would appreciate any suggestions about what people actually want to see. Additionally, if you'd be interested in attending a post-conference workshop with the three of us, let me know, since I want to seriously consider potentially trying to do something next year, and I'd like to see if people would actually be interested in staying over at the conference an extra day to do something like that.
Yeah, either coming in a day early or staying over a day later at the end, like before or after.
Right.
Because I know that our dear friend and colleague Mark Jones has a thing that happens the day before the official NORWAC stuff. So
right.
Not that we would be competing with him, but the venue would be open, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I was given I think it's a post-conference. So I'm just trying to decide whether to do a workshop on something, or it would kind of be more fun to do something with the three of us. But yeah, I'd like to hear what people think. All right, guys. Well, I think that's it for this episode of the podcast. So thanks a lot for joining me today. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to catch up with you guys. And I look forward to checking in again next month. I guess, Kelly, you'll be in Australia by that time, right?
I will be in Australia when I chat to you all next month. So I look forward to that, as always.
Awesome. And Austin, I hope that the world around you or nature outside of your house is not on fire by the time we talk again in a few weeks.
Yeah, me too. Me too. That would be great. The fires are closer than I would like.
Yeah.
But
well,
we've got a car. We can outrun it if need be.
Sure.
As long as you have a carrier for your cat.
Yeah,
we do. He loves. It's his least favorite thing in the world. But he used to just meow for hours if he was stuck in there, and now he just accepts it and gets super depressed. He's just like, oh, it's like you can't, cats are only reasonably emotionally communicative a lot of the time, but it's just like waves of depression coming off of this cat. He's just silent and just sits there and won't even eat treats. But that's better. That's better for going to the vet than, for 2 hours straight. That's how it used to be.
And next month we'll have to consider, when we do our forecast episode, maybe using this election with Pisces rising and Jupiter in the 9th for the next forecast episode.
Ooh. I don't know, dude. I kind of need to start like 3 things during a very small window of time.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Then we would have to do this instead of initiate other projects. All right, we'll think about that. We'll figure it out over the next few weeks, and we will see everyone again next month. So thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you again next time, and yeah, have a good month.
Bye.
Bye.